Yo, what's happening? Hey, how's it going? How are you? It's nice to see you again. Yeah, we're doing it again. We're doing it again. Why not? We're doing it again. Hi, it's me. Thanks for popping out of the YouTube channel. I'm just going to let as many people pop on as they can. Log in. Great opportunity for you to let your friends know, your family know that we're just hanging out. So Mackowycz, Bob Mackowycz and I went live here last week on YouTube, and then we thought that was fun, probably more fun than we figured it would be. So we said, well, why don't we just do it again and just hang out? It's a really unofficial thing, and it's, I mean, in a way, in large account, it's because Bob and I have done this for so long, just talking about stuff. We do a radio show together now on Apple Music with an amazing team. We broadcast in 165 countries around the world. We're Monday to Thursday on Apple Music Hits and on Apple Podcasts and Apple On Demand. We love doing it, but we know that there are times that we should just I should shut up and play songs on that show. We just thought, well, why don't we just talk about stuff? The whole world's on fire. There's all kinds of things to get into, so why don't we do it? Plus, it's live, and live is so much fun to be able to do. It's April the 10th. It's the 100th day of the year. It's the 100th day of the year. We're already into it. The show today was fun. It's National Siblings Day, so I hope you have a decent enough relationship with your sibling that you can send them that message. Unless you're not watching us live, you might be watching us on demand at some point on YouTube. If that is the case, then you're watching a time capsule, and you have come here from some distant world to this dry lake shore in Cairn and to this cylinder. And for those of you who have done that, please pray for us, who once too thought we could fly. Those are not my words. Margaret Atwood said that, actually. I think she wrote it in 2009 for some piece in The Guardian that was supposed to deal with climate crisis. And the good news is it's been fixed. Everything's been fine. So we are totally okay. So Margaret Atwood gets the first reference on here. There's a lot going on in the world, and there's a lot of stuff that we want to talk about. I should say this right off the bat, though. So this week, we decided to post a thing online that we did of Kurt Cobain, right? And it was the 30th anniversary, not necessarily of his passing, but the 30th anniversary of us finding out that he was gone. April 5th is when he, according to forensics, had died. And it was on April the 8th that we all found out. That was on the Monday. We weren't live on the Monday. So we just thought, why don't we just pop on and talk a little bit about Kurt Cobain? The numbers, the response, and the comments from you have been really lovely. Kind of wasn't expecting that, but I'm grateful for that. So this is the image you can find if you check out our YouTube channel, which if you're watching us on YouTube now, you're already here, but don't go to it now, go to it later. We'll put it in the description below, and you can actually get a chance to see it. If you haven't seen it already, you might be live streaming with us right now on Facebook or on LinkedIn. And then you can go check it up on our YouTube channel as well. So this is it. Everything changed. Bob and I worked on this, and then I called it an essay. We're going to change that name because I hate that concept of an essay, because I hated school, and no matter what's happened in my life, I'm never going to lose that. So I find that out there, the Cobain thing. We really appreciate that. And by the way, if you actually do go to it, there is a special appearance from a noted therapist.
Really cheesed that at you. You should have me on your program 20 years ago. For God's sake.
Oh,
I so desperately wanted to get on your TV
We
program.
tried. You weren't there. You weren't around.
Really? Okay. Okay.
No, it's not your
My
fault. It's the
Okay, I got
schedule.
it. All right.
Gabor Maté was it was so funny how in the middle of that whole interview we were doing on his book, The Myth of Normal, he just reverted back and wanted to talk about how he wasn't on the show. But that is okay. Oh my goodness. Look who's with us today. Hello, Robert.
I like that he was mad at you. First of all, you don't get enough of that in your life.
Look, first of all, I get more than enough of that in my life. But I get more than enough. But I'm glad he brought it up. I'm glad he brought it up.
And I also wanted to say, you should let those things be called essays, because you can't blame the essay that it's been taught wrong. In fact, if anything, you should be trying to take it back. Do you remember how U2, Bono says at the beginning of Helter Skelter, Charles Manson took this, we're taking it back?
Yeah.
You should do that with the essay.
There was no chance.
Or just call them Helter Skelters.
First of all, to take it back would imply that I once had them, Bob. And essays are nothing that I have ever had in my life. And you know what's funny is that what Bono said in that song was Charles Manson stole this from the Beatles, right? And we're stealing it back. Today, did you know, is the anniversary, 1970, when Paul McCartney announced that he was leaving the Beatles. This was the big anniversary. I'm sure you have some thoughts on that.
Everybody blamed him, but in a weird sort of way, all he did was make official what John Lennon said he was going to do like 6 months prior. Do you know what it was that set him off? It was the remix of Long and Winding Road.
He just couldn't do it.
Phil Spector's production on it had all this like super strings and everything, and he heard it and hated it, and he sent a note saying, "You're never going to do that again. Switch it back." And they didn't. He's like, "Okay, see ya."
That's it. Was Spector doing what John Lennon wanted, or what George Harrison wanted, or George Martin wanted?
Yes. There, you know what? Yeah, not George Martin at all, but God, you know what? Let's just stop now. Stop now before I beetle again.
You know what else today? Today is 1 year. Listen, I hate this day in histories because I find them to be a crutch, but it's one of those things that I hate that I love because I always want to know what happened because it helps me understand where we've been. 1 year ago today, the great Al Jaffee died. There's a whole generation of people who know who Al Jaffee is, but to those who don't know who Al Jaffee is, might he be the most important artist for generations of people and youngsters?
I'm going to go with Picasso, and according to the Sales of Imaginus posters at University Frosh Weeks, Salvador Dali's pretty high up there.
Right, but how
Al
much
Jaffee was one of the Al Jaffee was one of the illustrators, a primary illustrator for Mad Magazine, and for a lot of us, Mad Magazine was where we learned what was funny and what was satirical.
Mm-hmm.
Mad Magazine, I know there have been docs about it and books about it, but you just can't say enough about the genius of Mad Magazine.
Oh, it's. I think half of the movies that I'm very lucky that I know I have a pretty strong vocabulary when it comes to cinematic history, and I'm pretty sure it's partly because my uncle introduced me to so many beautiful movies. It's partly because Lon, the man who's married to my mother now, he had cable, so we had access to Saturday Night at the Movies, right, on PBS. So we watched a lot of them. But the other reason is because Mad Magazine spoofed them all. So Mad Magazine spoofed so many of these films that I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. Oh, by the way, Bob, there's a comment that just came on YouTube. Jay Mascis looks good with a beard.
That's really funny. I feel like I'm if Gandalf was in a punk band.
Yeah, it's definitely looked like.
I'm one of the raging Gandalfs.
That actually would be a pretty good name for a punk band. It's also 1925 today. Great Gatsby was published. I read it a long time ago. I don't remember much about it. A little bit about it. Was Gatsby important to you? I know people talk about it as one of the greats.
Gatsby is one of the great American novels. My favorite F. Scott Fitzgerald story because he was not afraid to prime before he painted, before he got to the party, maybe a couple of drinks to warm up.
Right. Yeah.
He was not invited to some big literary shindig, and he got completely hammered and got a bag and rounded up a whole bunch of neighborhood cats and then went to the gate outside of the house where they were having a garden party inside, started throwing the cats over the gate at the party.
Oh, no, that works. That absolutely.
You know, honestly, next time someone tells you that literature is high culture, just remember the F. Scott Fitzgerald lob and cat story.
I love
that. That's how high culture they were.
Janice says hello, watching on Facebook from Moncton. I was in Moncton when the Great Eastern Seaboard blackout happened. I happened to be in Moncton for that. We just saw this LinkedIn user comment. Had been a fan for years, excited to tune in. Thank you. We decided to do this on YouTube last week, and we'll end up leaving the entire on-demand version of this on YouTube. That's the place to go see it. But we wanted to see if we could just share it on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. In part because my LinkedIn is essentially just a bunch of hedge fund managers or bankers reaching me in my DMs asking if I would want to have a coffee on Zoom so we could talk about my planning. The answer to that question is almost always no, which I really like that. Holly is on a break from her poker tournament. Oh, I hope. Are you dealing or are you playing? Holly works at casinos and deals in Detroit. I love that. And hello, Jesse. Thanks for doing. Bob, there's a million things. Listen, we started this because we were just messing around, right? We just wanted to have fun and just talk about what's going on. And I used to host a talk show, and you've hosted shows, and you produced Off the Record on TSN. And we started together 30 years ago. Do you know that it's actually this summer, 30 years ago, that we actually met? 30 years ago. June 28th was when Wendell Clark was traded, and I think shortly thereafter was that going away party at Mackowycz Square for Wendell Clark, and that's where we first met 30 years ago, dude.
I remember what I thought when I first saw you, because you had long hair back then. I thought, that dude looks like Alanis. And you did.
I did.
This was just objectively true.
All right. There's somebody I want to bring on in just a bit. First of all, today, when we're hanging out, our loose plan is, and let's see if the technology works. It's just me in this room by myself in LA, just trying to push all these buttons. Tanya and Nathan, who are working on the show with us while producing the show, Tanya is been obsessed on Instagram with this account called SkyDog Sanctuary, which is in Malibu here, and it's a place that rescues Mustangs and donkeys. I obviously was excited about the rescued Mustangs. She was very much excited about the rescued donkeys. So we went, when she was in town, we went up there and we saw them. I want to share some of that with you in just a little bit. It centers around the idea, do horses grieve? Of course they do, but how do they grieve? How do donkeys grieve? And, you know, in our never stopping quest to try to, you know, spread a little bit of empathy and compassion on the peanut butter that we try to eat here every day in our lives. We hope that you can connect to some of that. Tell your friends, let them know where we are. You can always just do this if you like as well with us. Somebody that I've been reading for a long time is a guy called David Moscrop. He's going to join us in just a little bit. I like it. He's got, you know, we talk about this all the time off air, but we see it on social media. You follow the news, the way news is reporting on things like inflation, but also younger generations who can't afford things, and then strange little bits. David's got a pinned tweet that haunts me. And so it just seemed like a perfect time to bring him in. There's a lot of stuff to do this. First of all, here is the particular blog TO post. Here, Bob, I got this over your face. Let's do this here. Let's go like that. Let's go like that.
I think that's where it belongs.
Oh, on your face. That's right. Okay, look at this. So Evie Kwong, apologies. We have entered the blog TO makes an April Fool's joke about food being affordable level of society because blog TO posted that Rogers Center announced new food and drink pricing everywhere under $10. So it was, Evie's point is very well taken that what a disaster we are living in currently when the April Fool's joke is food. You can afford food all of a sudden. And David Moscrop has covered this a lot, contributing columnist with the Washington Post, got a couple of current affairs podcasts as well, wrote a book, which I loved, which is essentially, is about, are we dumb, too dumb for democracy? So I want to talk to him in just a second. Let's actually bring David in now, because this is, dude, it's really nice to see you today. How are you?
I'm well, after listening to the first few minutes there, I'm feeling pretty good.
You feel good about what, the life, the world?
I just want to talk about Mad Magazine.
Al Jaffee's really important, isn't he?
I know.
Weren't they?
I grew up reading Mad and Cracked, and It was funny because I grew up with a single mom, and she was semi-proper. I mean, like, you probably shouldn't be reading that stuff. You shouldn't be watching The Simpsons and Family Guy. But I was such a little shit. I was like, well, what are you going to do about it? You're working 3 jobs to be able to afford the kids you got. You can't stop us from reading Mad and Crack. You don't have the time.
It's funny. I also grew up raised by a single mom, and she had no idea that Mad Magazine was my introduction to things that were way beyond where probably I should have been reading, although I'm really grateful for that opportunity. Matt, we reached out to you yesterday and you said yes right away. Thanks for coming on today.
Oh, my pleasure. I interrupted watching the new Fallout show to come do this. That's how excited I was.
Amazing. Well, we're very... Listen, that's the good news. You can actually just go back to it whenever you want. So look, dude, there's, that post that came out around April Fool's was one thing. There was another article that came out. You actually wrote about it today and the reaction to it, just about where we are now in terms of how you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And one of the reasons I wanted to, and Bob and I wanted to just go on and hang out live streams. These aren't official shows because we've done enough shows in our life. This is just keeping people company and sharing ideas. It's just that, you can't afford a house. So that was always the gold standard. You can't afford a house. Now journalists are going to make fun of you because you buy avocado toast, when even though avocado toast is not really the problem. In the same way that they ask us to use plastic straws so that we don't have to look at corporations telling us what to do. But at the same time, there's always, every generation has a view that the generation before them wants it better than it ought to be. or they want things and they need to learn things. So I just wanted to reach out to you because we know you've written a ton about it and just where we are. And that just, can you walk us through the concept of damned if you do, damned if you don't from your perspective?
Yeah, I was thinking about it in the context of this Business Insider piece that was saying, folks are really splurging these days on groceries.
Right.
And that it was complicated because the piece was talking about people splurging on the extras, not bread and milk
Right.
and meat, but Red Bulls and fancy branded waters and that sort of thing. But the pressure people were feeling was such that they immediately read it as, oh well, people are splurging on bread, right? But my criticism was, when we hear about the avocado toast, when we hear about people splurging on Red Bull, when we hear about people getting shit for wanting to go out to the movies, we're trapped between a market that tries to induce our demand to go and spend on this stuff and then getting chastised for doing it, right? So you got a big industry of marketers, a big industry of corporations who press really hard to get you to spend this money. And then you turn around and get judged for it. And it's indicative of a bigger problem, which is we had this bargain, at least this imaginary bargain for years. You work hard, you go to school, you put in your time, you get a house, you get a pension, you do your part. And that's broken down. You don't get that anymore, right? You don't get a pension anymore. You don't get a house anymore. You probably can't even afford a car anymore. Have you seen how much cars cost? Oh my God. And so people are starting to get really sensitive and really pissed, and rightfully so. And it's not getting much better. It's deeply frustrating because they turn around and they kick us in the ass for it.
I mean, you write for a lot of publications and you have over your career. So take us in, and this is part of the reason, a big reason why I wanted to have you to talk to you about this. Look, there are a handful of, I try not to walk through this life with enemies, and never mind about me, but there are a handful of occupations in this world that I think are the worst of all time. Headline writers being one of them, because they can write anything and they're never, you don't know who it is. But when you're in these places and you see articles getting pitched or things going, what's inside all of this?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing is a desire to get people to click on the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I mean, we know from data that a lot more people are sharing headlines and commenting on headlines and pieces than are reading them. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So layer one is who shares the thing or who sees the thing. Layer two is who shares the thing or comments on the thing. Layer three is who bothers to click on the article. Layer four is who starts to read it. Layer five is who reads it to the end. By the time you get to layer five, you're at like Dante's final circle of hell. You're going all the way down. Dante's somewhere over one of my shoulders over here. Unread, but on the shelf just in case anybody asks. Like you're way, way, way down. But so what you're getting is the headline interpretation of things. And you might say, oh, that's just what lazy, stupid, ignorant people do. Like, no, I've seen wildly smart professional people do this. I've done it, right? It's like my book, Too Dumb for Democracy, ? And I certainly don't exempt myself from the things that make us bad at democracy. We're all part of the problem. And so the headline is the thing. And, whether it's a hate read or a deep introspective read, it's the same click, right? It's the same advertiser 0.02 cents. It's the same thing. So there's a lot of pressure to get eyeballs to things, and then keeping them is the next level. But, you want to get them through the gate at least. And this is part of what leads to these clickbaity headlines. And it's a race to the bottom, because as soon as one chucklehead does it, then everybody's got to do it.
So I when I was growing up, I had a large distrust of institutions, and I still do. I used to write when I was 13 years old. I used to write to the House of Commons and ask for copies of the Hansard Report at 13. So I would be listening to Iron Maiden on cassette and reading the Hansard Report, so I was and I remain very engaged politically. But I always I saw it through a filter of they're not on our side. So I didn't believe government was really on our side. I didn't believe cops, I still don't, are on our side. Judges are on our side. I don't believe churches are on our side. So I grew up with a healthy distrust, sometimes unhealthy distrust of all institutions. So That includes media, by the way. And so it surprises everybody, including myself, that this has become my life, that I do this.
Yeah.
So I have never in a million years read a thing, hopefully, or connected to things and believed that it was their responsibility to do right by me, because I had never seen throughout history them doing right by me. So,
Yeah.
and one of my toxic traits is I have an extreme personal accountability for myself. How do you get people to realize that, yes, while we do want the institutions and media and all this to be better, it never has been. So why? What makes us think it's going to be different now?
We're in such big trouble because we've reached an era in which people are pushed to the brink day to day.
Mhm.
They can't get through the day. And so what we want them to do is to go the extra mile, to engage in good faith, to take the time to really think things through, not to, to split into, hockey teams to do their politics. But that's asking them to do more work. And it's asking institutions and political elites and economic elites not to try to exploit people to get them to do that.
Mhm.
And it's next to impossible. Like, one of the things I often ask is, if you have a right, but you don't have the material resources to fulfill that right, do you really have it? And my argument is, no, you don't.
Correct. I
Right?
agree.
Like, if I might say to you, you have a right to vote, but you're worried that if you leave your shift, you're going to get your ass fired, even though you have a legal right to take the time. Then you don't really have a right to vote. If you have a right to participate in the political process, but you can't afford to because you don't have the time to go out because you're a caregiver, then you don't really have the right.
Yeah.
And it's so when I look at the world and think, well, with the state of information flows, with the state of social media, with the state of the legacy media, we want people to do extra work to make up for institutions that are collapsing around them and aren't serving them, and elites who are out to manipulate them towards their own ends. And people are like, man, I can't afford groceries. It took me 3 hours because transit doesn't work, so I couldn't get to my job. And now egghead come into my house and say to me, well, you should really pay attention, which is what people like me go and say.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a huge disconnect there. So I'm with you on the personal responsibility thing, because it's absolutely critical, because you're right. People are out to manipulate you one way or the other. And then people are just like, I can't do it. I can't get through the day. And so they get cynical, they get distrustful, and they check out. And the more they check out, the more that people are in positions of authority and power get to run around and do whatever they want. So it's a pretty vicious cycle. And that's why I always bring it back to economics, which is something we're really bad at doing in this country. Economics and power. We got to get the resource thing right and the power thing right before we get anything else right.
Economics, the Globe and Mail had a headline and an article which said it was just, consumers may grumble, but these oligopolies are great for investors, good for investors. And I'm reading it and I just thought, okay, this is, and and you're like, I agree with you that it is like this, and that we shouldn't have to ask everybody to do the extra mile. Because I think in part because I think Canada is, any good country is an idea, and it's a promise you're supposed to live up to. And I don't think we live up to it in a lot of ways. I'm pretty hard on Canada in many respects, but I have also been privileged enough to travel around the world to places that when you return to Canada, you can see there are lots of really good things about the country too. Really, really good things about Canada. And sometimes people on my side of the political argument can get a little bit too just blah, 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 Canada, historical. Yeah, and all that's legit. But there are a lot of really wonderful things about Canada. In part, it's because we're here talking about these sorts of things. But that article in the Globe and Mail, it to me was the shining of light of why so many just hate all of this. And who cares what it's like for investors? They're lying to us anyway, right? Who cares? This is bad for everybody, and they've convinced us that it's good in some respect.
Yeah, there's this thing the media does. And like, the media isn't one single thing. The media is not a monolith, right? You know this as well as anybody. The media is a very complicated, layered, different thing, and one person isn't indicative of the whole thing, nor is one outlet. But there's this, like, my favorite bit from The Big Lebowski is when they're talking, and he's like, the dude's like, "You're not wrong, Walter. You're just an asshole," which is Me and my buddy throw this line around all the time because it's just so funny and it's so true. Like, you're not wrong. You're just an asshole. And so many news stories these days and articles amount to that, right? Journalists who aren't wrong.
Yeah.
It's just kind of dickish, right? So, look, I write for the Globe Mail. I read the Globe Mail every day. I'm in Globe Business. I'm in Globe Books. I'm in Globe. And I have very many nice things to say about the Globe Mail. That piece was the investment reporter telling the truth, right?
Yeah.
He was saying, like, look, now I think it represents a cynical reality and is deeply problematic. And if I'm writing that story, I write it differently than him. But he's an investment reporter, and I'm a shit poster freelance opinion writer. Like, we're playing different games, Like, he's out there playing hockey, and I'm playing video games, and I'm playing Fallout. But he was basically saying, look, yeah, sure, oligopolies are bad for competition. They're bad for productivity. They're bad for consumers because it leads to worse services and higher prices, but they're great for investors. And it's true. If you're the kind of person that's got the money to invest, the fact is these oligopolies outperform the index. They outperform the S&P. It's great money to invest long-term, great dividends for folks. Oh, by the way, it's worse for everyone else. And what bothers me about this is that if you're investing in these companies, you're then part of the problem, because we're saying, like, look, these oligopolies in telecom, in banking, in railway, et cetera, in groceries. My God, we can talk about groceries. We talk about Loblaw. They're great for you as an investor. They're terrible for everyone else. But when you're buying into these companies, you're supporting them. So if I'm reading them, I'm saying that might be a great investment, but I have to still put my head down on my pillow at night and try to sleep and live with myself. And we all have that moment where we're sitting in bed, we're lying in bed, our heads on the pillow, and we have our nightly come to Jesus moment, however that may manifest. Like, I got to meet myself every night when my head hits that pillow, and I can't meet myself if I'm owning stock in Loblaw.
Right. Here's Michelle just commented here. Let me add this on here so we can see it. Loblaws, who are getting richer, have a commercial right now where the food banks of Canada, right? You can see it right there. Thank them for their donations. Loblaws will be mad at us, but that's okay. That is okay. This is it. I love that you're fighting the fight. I love that you're telling your stories. Can I ask you one question? As a journalist, can you help me find this guy here?
Hold on. Let me see if I can get.
Hold on. You get there and see if I can move it over. There we go. There. That's the.
You want to hear a funny story about this? So I started growing this right after the 2019 election because I was just so sick of putting myself together. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna let myself go, and I'm like, I'll cut it, eventually. And then March 2020 rolled around. I was like, well,
right.
Here we go. And so I didn't cut it until I decided I wanted to start dating again. And I was like, it's like Groucho Marx, right? Like, I don't want to date anybody who wants to date this guy.
I don't know, man. That's pretty fun. That looks pretty fun.
It's a choice. But so I decided to cut it, and I'm out. It's almost spontaneous. I'm walking down the road, and I'm like, today's the day. So I go by this barber shop on Sussex, and I walk in, and I say, and the guy looks at me, and he looks up, and he's like he's looking at the Ark of the Covenant that's been opened. You know what I mean? It's like, Marion, close your eyes. And he looks at me, and he starts laughing, and he's like, "Can I help you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I would like to book in for a haircut and a shave tomorrow." And the guy laughs at me again. He turns around, looks at his buddy, and he's like, "Hey, come here." And the guy comes over, and the guy starts laughing, and he just looks at me, looks at him, dead ass in the eyes, looks at me, and says, "We're going to book you in for a double."
Did it help your dating experience, by the way?
Yeah, it did, actually. I'm living with the person I subsequently met in this house, and it worked out.
Have you showed them pictures of the old you? Would they have still gone for it?
Oh, yeah. So she very specifically was like, well, when I looked you up, because the Toronto Star had done this piece during the pandemic that I was a part of, which is "Pandemic Hair Don't Care," and it was a
Right.
feature on the people who had grown out their hair during the pandemic, and I was one of the people. And so, and I'd been doing TV. I was on like CNN looking like that, no joke.
I love it.
And I'm like, well, I thought at some point they're going to say to me, "No, we're not putting you on looking like that," right? But I'm like a white dude, so obviously nobody says no to you, and you get to look how you want because patriarchy. And
let's bring on Bob here now. Look at this. So, but there's Bob. So, let's do this. Hold on. Let's get Moscrop beard back.
Yeah.
So,
I honestly, when I looked at this, thought that's not me. My hair's not that light.
And I learned how expensive hair products are for women because I had to buy hair ties or men or whomever that uses hair ties. I'm like, right, I'm experiencing the pink tax. Like this shit is expensive.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, I think you both look good. Okay,
George.
Yep.
I hope somebody tunes this in right now and looks at that screen with that graphic you just had up and thinks, what the hell is going on here?
That's kind of the whole idea.
What exactly is happening on George's feed right now?
That's kind of the whole idea. And by the way, if you are just tuning into us this second right now, that fella that you see is David Moscrop. David, there's actually another piece that I want to bring. I want to bring you on to. I just want to comment this, and I think this is really interesting from a guy called Greg. Here's what Greg said. When you're talking about politics, and especially when you vote for the guy that will change things, and then they don't change things, and fool me once, shame on you, and they goes to the whole fool thing. But which is a problem. I know that a lot of people who are centrists, lefties who maybe held their nose and voted for the Liberals in a time they didn't want to, they feel like they've gone through this in Canada with the Trudeau government. I know there are lots of. I think the Trudeau government gets a lot of attacks for stuff that isn't fair. It's usually people not understanding civics, and not everything is the federal government's responsibility. But there are things that governments don't deliver on. And so all of a sudden you sit there and you think, okay, well, why would I vote for that person again if they haven't done it? I know in the United States where I am right now, the word Genocide Joe gets thrown around an awful lot when it comes to Joe Biden and his role in what's happening in Palestine and Gaza with Israel. So people just, like, you tell them you got to vote, you got to participate, but why?
I know. I have a policy to never tell anyone how to vote or never chastise someone for not voting. As someone who votes regularly but almost always picks a loser, I feel like I need to, because I bang on about how important this stuff is and I should go and do it. But when someone says to me, like, I just can't bring myself to do this, I'm like, you know what? I respect that. Can you imagine going to the US right now? And some Democrats do this and it drives me bananas. And like looking at a Muslim voter and saying, boy, if you don't vote for Biden, you're basically a fascist because Trump's going to win. I'm like, well, that's quite the voter outreach strategy. Let's see. It's like that GIF with Jason Bateman. It's like, oh, it's a bold play, Cotton. Let's see how it works for him. I'm like, I think that's a bad strategy. Yeah, I think we can at once admit that the stakes are high, that there's a difference between the parties, whether it's Canada, the US, whatever it might be, and saying that it's on the parties to reach out and mobilize people, right? Like I was a young liberal way back in the day, and then I drifted. But the moment that I really got jokerfied, I think, was post 2015, where I sort of believed the liberals might be serious about electoral reform, which I thought was really important. And then and I was a part of that process. And when that went down, I was just like, I'm not going to get burned again. It was really like, fooled me. You're not going to fool me again. And ever since then, I've been kind of, with admitting all of the notes that you mentioned, which are important, I got kind of jokerfied from that. And like, I just am deeply, deeply distrusting now. And part of the problem is parties, when they're outside of government or running for election, make promises they know their asses can't cash, right? They're writing these checks they know they can't cash, and they're over promising, and then they turn around and say, oh, just kidding, turns out this is actually really complicated and hard. If we all agreed to just level with people and tell them the truth at the outset, in the long run, people would be like, oh, I get it, it is hard. But instead they're like, no, we're going to get everything, don't worry about it. And then they burn them, and people are like, well, then I'm out. And it's hard to blame folks for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate you popping on. Come back again if you're ever free. We're just hanging out.
Anytime. I can pause Fallout anytime and pop up here, and I'm down. I'm totally down.
What are you writing now? What's your next? Can you talk about what your next assignment is?
Yeah, I'm writing a bunch of things. So you mentioned that I freelance for a lot of folks as I get out and do the daily
Yeah.
hustle.
Mhm.
And I'm working on a piece inspired by Cory Doctorow, who's one of my favorite people.
Love Corey. Love Corey.
He's the best, and I talk to him all the time whenever he's got something going on, which is always the guy's got like 7 or 8 books in the pipeline because he told me recently in a pod that I recorded with him. He's like, "Oh, I write when I'm anxious," and which is always right now, right? Because like, look, everything's anxiety inducing. But he coined the term "enshittification," which
Oh
is
my
just
God.
great. It's so brilliant. It's so good. It's like everything is becoming enshittified because
Yeah.
you get captured in this world, and then the people who are in control can do whatever they want because where are you going to go? And
Yeah.
so everything gets a little bit worse bit by bit. Like streaming. Streaming was going to free us from cable, and now streaming is absolute shit. Right? It's expensive, and there's
So
commercials
expensive.
again. It's basically a cable. But I'm writing a piece about enshittification, and then I'm writing a piece about the experience of buying a house. Actually, my first house.
Dude. So
Yeah.
you're one of the few in your age group who may be able to.
It's a crazy story, and it's not until it won't be until the summer. But like I grew up with single mom poor. The last time someone in my immediate family owned property was like 1988 before my parents divorced, and then it was just that was it. No one in my immediate family was going to own property. And then my situation changed, and I was in a position where, through luck and hard work, blah blah blah. But let's be honest, luck, it became possible. And so I'm going to write that up in trying to understand what that means and how it relates to other folks. And then those are the big long-term ones.
I love it. I love it. Here's a comment Tony just put out. Buddy grew out his hair and cut his hair and donated it for wigs for kids. Did you do that?
No, I couldn't for some reason. It was I don't know if it was quite long enough, or there was some reason I couldn't do it because it was in the middle of the pandemic, and so it might have been something about pandemic stuff because I had initially looked at that.
Yeah.
But they were like, it's going to be a problem. But I should have. Well, maybe I should do it again. Oh, I'm for different reasons. I'm not really allowed to grow it out again.
Right. No, you're not allowed. Oh, for different reasons. Nikki says that sometimes things can't get done in a 4-year term, and we don't realize that often. And that sometimes the systemic change is just much.
That's true. I mean, although politicians will lead you to believe that they can do it in 4 years.
Yeah, they surely will.
Which is part of the problem, right? But again, I'm as critical of the liberals as anybody. I'm a socialist. I'm one of the few potty trained mainstream socialists. I like to say that I'm the potty trained socialist in Canadian mainstream journalism. Like, think about it right now. If you think of socialist journalists who are in mainstream newspapers and mainstream TV in this country, there aren't a lot of us, right? For whatever reason, I'm the potty trained one that they let in the house because they know I'm not going to piss on their rug.
Right.
And to bring it back to Lebowski.
So room together though, that's the thing. But
yeah. But I mean, the liberals, did in their time accomplish some big things. I mean, I think if we look at the party in the long run, we're going to remember the Canada Child Benefit lifted a lot of kids out of poverty. Like, I wish we'd had that when I was a kid. Yeah. That's a big damn deal. Legalizing pot was a big damn deal. The vaccine procurement that this country was world class, among the best in the world. That was a big deal. As flawed as the pandemic assistance measures were, the CERB and the wage subsidy and the business loan, those saved a lot of people's asses. We could talk about, whether it should have been more or extended or we should have UBI, but like, that saved a lot of people's asses in the clutch. I do have more time for the liberals than a lot of folks on the left, but I still think we should be socialists.
I'm not really. I was never, and I was public about it on my live streams on Instagram, that I'm not into any vaccine mandates or anything like that. But I don't really judge any political party for how they handled the pandemic, because everybody did it differently and everybody got it wrong because there was no wrong, there was no right. No one knew. That's what I heard. And I know enough of them. Enough of them to know it's not like they were actively trying to put microchips into your body. Everybody was doing the best they could with the information they had. So I don't hold, each province. I don't, different parties were in charge of different things. Who I do hold responsible are the people who really reduced the safety of long-term care facilities. And they were, and by the way, lots of parties who weren't that, like Conservatives could have cut it in Ontario. Liberals were in power for a long time, didn't fix it. So you can point at who to blame for a lot of the problems we had, but how they actually handled everybody got it wrong.
It was awful.
Yeah.
It was awful. And I mean, I think it's funny is now that we're still in the pandemic, but we're not in the pandemic like we were in the pandemic in 2020, 2021. And now we have a little bit of distance. We're like, we can assess it, but we're assessing it with a bit of distance and with a bit of dispassion and removal. But go put yourself back where you were when you were sandblasting your groceries and quarantining your mail. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And try to think about a government's got to roll out a program that would usually take them months, if not years, and they got to do it in days and weeks. And everyone's scrambling, and the supply chains are falling apart, and we don't know what this thing is, and we don't know how it works, and we don't know if there is going to be a vaccine, and if there is, when, and what's that going to mean, and try to make decisions and sort it out in that context. And yeah, it's crazy. It's a big damn deal. So I feel you on that a lot. And I was told at the start of the pandemic, like, I have a lung thing, and my doctor's just like, I don't know what's going to happen if you get it. Don't get it. And so I more or less spent 18 months inside by myself. I was living alone in my apartment, and
we could tell.
Like, you could, like, no joke. I was like, and I remember when I finally got my first dose, and then I went out onto my first patio, and I hadn't been out on a patio having a drink with someone in, no joke, 18 months, something like that. And I was just like, felt free. And by the way, I finally got COVID for the first time like 6 months ago or something like that. And I was fine. But we forget like how intense those moments were sometimes. And
they were.
We don't have a lot of grace for people, right? Like you're
right.
I don't, this might sound a little hokey, but I do think for a lot of different reasons, we've lost our capacity or willingness to extend grace. And it's hard to do, especially now, especially when others don't want to. But once that goes, it becomes really tough to get things done. It makes us worse people. And when I feel like there's days where I really lose that capacity, or that capacity vanishes in me, I'm like, I'm a worse person for that. And it's a worse day because of it. And I just have to kind of kick my ass and remind myself to extend that little bit of grace sometimes.
You have to do it. Maybe in the next little while you can come back on and we can talk about the rise of, well, not the rise, the establishment of populism, what populism means. I don't think people understand how the different range that can be contained in that. And also 2 big elections coming up. Let's do that next time.
It's funny. I just finished writing about populism. I wrote a big academic piece for it last summer, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So, and by the way, we're going to be living this election for like 18 months before it even starts.
I know.
I don't know if you're ready for that, but I'm just like, I can't do this.
I grew up listening to so much punk rock and heavy metal that I am built for this. I am built for this. Thanks, buddy. Good to see you.
Oh, my pleasure entirely. Thanks for having me.
Good luck at Fallout. Go get it.
Thank you.
Bye. David Moscrop. Love David Moscrop. And I love that. And Bob, hold on. I got too many of us on here. Let's just go like this. And then let's go like this. There we go. That beard. You look great with a beard. I've known you for 30 years now. And I think you don't wear it like his, he said he didn't want to meet somebody. What does your wife think about the new you with the beard?
I don't know if she's seen it.
She hasn't got into it. I'm really, I love reading David. I'm really grateful that he popped on for a little bit to talk to us.
Talking about politicians that let you down, there's a line I loved about the California politician Dianne Feinstein. Someone said that she's what happens when you vote for the lesser of 2 evils 10 times in a row.
It's heartbreaking. But it's true. Dude,
you know what? I got to say before you move on, I'm a bit more of an optimist about politics than I think you guys are. There is one fear I have about the kind of like gleeful demolition of our institutions. On the other side, things are worse. And sometimes I worry that people hear things don't work, which they're not. Lots of things don't work. And immediately assume that also means they can't work.
Right.
And there is a delta between don't work and can't work that is called responsibility. And it's always been a fight. It's always been a fight. And there's progress, and then it gets clawed back. And there's progress and it gets clawed back. But think about even in our lives. Like my mom went to a public school where they had water fountains for kids who weren't white.
Yeah. Yeah.
and kids who would.
Yeah.
Right. And now she lives in a totally different world. And because we're so atomized and we think about things in terms of very short periods of time, it's 70 years.
Yeah.
In 70 years, we went from one place to a completely different place. Now, are there problems today? Of course, there are problems today. And it's really important to
Yeah.
discuss those. But sometimes I worry that progress is impossible when we don't allow it to be flawed.
I also think, though, that a lot of the stuff that you're talking about that has changed is because people fought it really hard and were very clear about how busted it was. And so it's I think it's just part of our responsibility as people is to not burn it all down, burn most of it down, or some of it down, or rewrite it, or whatever fuel you need to push yourself. Just don't lose sight of the big goal. Even for me, I had to make big changes. I work with the World Food Program, as you know, and it's big changes. You like people say, you want to save the world? No. Have you seen the world? Like, I don't want to save it. You can't save it. You just got to do your part. You can, or you'll get overwhelmed by the enormity of the calamity that's out there.
I would say this, and far be it from me to, advocate for happiness in this moment. I mean, it's kind of a tough moment in history, but a lot of them are. I think it helps though if you think of yourself at a moment in history, though, and it is part of a continuum. That we are part of a story, and the story has been where it's been, and it's going where it's going, and we don't know where that is.
Yeah.
And I go back to Joe Strummer and his amazing words that he had to you, and he said to a lot of people just before he died, which is, "Don't forget you're alive.
Yeah.
That you're not dead. That everything can be different tomorrow. You just don't know. But the second you decide that it can't be different, it won't be." So, I don't want to be kumbaya, but I think it's really important just to say, just because things don't work doesn't mean they can't work. Are you going to do it? Kumbaya, my lord?
Lord, kumbaya. I actually don't know how to play kumbaya. I do not know how to play kumbaya on guitar.
The second it's on an acoustic guitar, every song is kumbaya.
Listen, let's change only because because the way our brains work. By the way, Gary quite rightly, says that progress doesn't take a straight line, right? You got to take the long view. He agrees, right? Which is true. You mentioned happiness, right? And happiness was a big component of the Kurt Cobain thing that we had done, which you can find on YouTube. We'll put a link to it in there. And this idea about you can't always choose it because brain chemistry is what it is, right? Not everybody can do it, but the idea of happiness and what you think you need to achieve it is just, it's maybe not the bill that we were sold or the bill that we think we need.
The piece that went up on YouTube, it's about 12 minutes long, and it covers a variety of points. But I think the two most important points are that artists, because of an inherent sensitivity, find themselves at greater potential for grief because good things feel better, but bad things feel worse. And it's just a natural disposition to be able to feel. And that was actually Gabor Maté, the guy who was so pissed at you earlier, who made that point beautifully. And that was quoted in the piece. And the other thing is that fame is really weird and probably not good for people, and particularly not good for people who are sensitive, because so much gets hurled at you and it's such an inherently crazy existence. And you would know about this, that you have to be resilient. And for someone who feels double, God, you would have to feel half as much and it would still be hard, never mind double. So that to me is what really jumped out about the piece, was that the irony is that his makeup made him perfect to communicate with us and left him in great peril and open to a lot of problems.
You brought up fame. The part that I think brought maybe you and I a little bit more joy than it ought to was this part here. Let's just play a little moment of it. This is going to get me in trouble, but I don't care. I'll say it anyway. We live in a world today where so many celebrities are basically all avatars of success, and songs are just background scores for Instagram or TikTok filters applied to a life experience. And the artists themselves seem to have replaced the genuine human condition with an almost sociopathic commitment to looking like the high priests and priestesses of winning. You can envy them, but you're never getting that close. Unless, of course, you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you pray for an hour, you hit the gym for 5 hours, you listen to The Art of War on audiobook while getting a BBL, then you pray again, then you do an ultra marathon in a private jet before a day of charging your fans $50 for a happy birthday video on an app. Kurt wasn't like that. He would hate that. it's true. Kurt would absolutely. I don't want to put words in Kurt's mouth, but that's exactly right. And my Instagram, I've worked really hard to make sure that my Instagram feed doesn't have as much of that super positive. Hey, stay prayed up at 4 a.m. Let's go working, because it drives me crazy. But I was thinking about how lucky we were to have Kurt.
Our brains are probably wired to want status.
Yeah.
And so, fame and the desire to be recognized, I think, at just a really primal level. It's not just shallow. It becomes very shallow. It's very manipulatable. Yeah. But I think at a certain level, that desire for, like, you look at the teen brain and how important relationships are to the teen brain. And then you look at status and that sort of adult tribal brain and how important it is to seem like an alpha within a tribe, but too much of it's just nuts. I mean, even the Stoics back in the day, who were kind of chill about everything, if you threatened their rep, they tended to sweat. That's like the one thing that could freak out the Stoics was you might lose some riz.
Yeah. You might lose some. There's some Stoic, by the way.
I believe Marcus Aurelius said that.
Marcus Aurelius said you don't want to lose your riz. Eid Mubarak, by the way. Ramadan ending. So we're sending our love to people out there. Tanya texted and said BBL. Does that, because I said, do we know what a BBL is? Brazilian butt lift, which in LA you see an awful lot of that. I
don't know what that is. I look, dude, like I'm married with a family, like, maybe UFC is the closest I get to a Brazilian butt lift. I think I saw someone do that move. What is it? What is it?
Oh no, I don't even want to. It's, you get this. It's if you don't like the way your ass looks, right? You get some implants put in your ass or some version of that, and you get it. Oh, by the way, Yasmin has just commented Stoic Riz, another band name. That could be the band name.
Not to be glib about it, but I was watching the piece on Kurt Cobain, and I was thinking about a great quote that you and I have shared many times from Bill Murray, who said that people always say to him, "How do I become rich and famous?" And his answer is, "Well, try just rich first and see if that's enough."
Yeah, see if that doesn't cover it. Absolutely.
see if that doesn't do it for you.
Oh my God. Grifters. So we're talking about we had talked about the idea of these celebrities being the high priests and high priestesses of winning, and of course one of the great things, and it sort of ties into what we were talking about with David Moscrop. The caption on this YouTube stream and Facebook and all that is this idea is how to stay happy when people don't, the society is not designed for you to actually be happy. And it's because one of the things is our brains are so easily hackable. Our brains are so easily hackable, and it's not just advertisers who hire neuroscientists, but the politicians know more than sometimes the advertising companies do, and the marketing companies. We're just open to suggestions. So it's really easy for us to see a thing and go, yeah, that's the thing I want. Yeah, more importantly, that's the thing that I need. We got into it a little bit with Anil Seth last week, who we played a clip of the Anil Seth interview in our show. He had written that book called Being You, which is about consciousness and what is consciousness. That interview is now up on the YouTube channel. Let me play a little clip of that. We know that lies travel, X times faster than truth does. So does inspiration and hope. We have and we used to have them, but we would call them snake oil salesmen. We have this wave after wave of wellness grifters on social media, and these these men talking about you and this is who you are, you soldier, you lion. We're getting inundated with all this stuff. What do you think when you scroll through and see all this manipulation and influence that is out there right now in social media and the way the brain works with it?
Yeah, I mean, I try to avoid it, and it's but I'm sure I still see a bunch of it, and I'm actively trying not to see it, which makes it clear how pervasive this stuff can be. And in a sense, it's good that people have this drive to feeling better, to increasing well-being, and thinking of life and health not just as fixing illness, but as enhancing quality of life, enhancing health span, not just lifespan. I think that's good. But you're absolutely right. I mean, how do you distinguish the signal from the noise here? I think there is signal, and I think there are going to be some good things. In my own area of the brain, there's so much activity and so much heat and light and sound about nootropics and supplements that can enhance cognitive ability, and brain implants again further down the line. All of these things raise questions that are way beyond scientific questions. They're intensely difficult scientific questions about how any of this stuff actually works. You know, a lot of it won't turn out to work at all.
Yeah.
And that can be known. I mean, that's just hard work. You need to do well-conducted experiments to see if these things that are supposed to make a difference actually do make a difference. Yeah. So that's the first thing, you know, I think, like, is what's the evidence base for any of this? There can be a very, very compelling story, but unless there's a solid evidence base, then it's hard to have confidence however good the story is.
Right.
But then there are all these other questions about what level of change is desirable. You know, how much do we want to change ourselves? Is that something that should just have no actual limit? And these other issues of, well, social equality, you know, are we in danger of creating a cognitive overclass of people who have access to cognitively enhancing technologies?
That's going to be a lot to contend with. I like that we're at the beginning of this journey, though.
Yeah, I think it combines this journey of understanding consciousness really does balance a sense of progress with a sense, and there is this wider humility. Humility, again, is the right word here. You know, I get a little exasperated when people pronounce with great confidence that they've solved the problem of consciousness and we understand it all. I don't think we do. I might be wrong about that. It might be there in plain sight, but I really don't think it is. And as we make progress towards it, I think we can help not only solve this really powerful existential challenge that, you know, where are we in the universe? What are we all doing here? But we can begin to make a difference in the day-to-day, in how we live with each other, in how we live with technology, in how we live with ourselves.
The full conversation is now up on this YouTube channel here. If you're watching us on YouTube, if not, the Strombo Show. Boom, 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 boom. If you like hip hop history, I love this comment right here. The people who serve your coffee having to live in shelters. What exactly are we talking about tonight when it comes to being happy versus sad? No, I think it was just this idea that there are enormous forces working against you to be happy, because there's just a lot more money invested in making sure that you buy all the things that you think you need to be happy. But I think, you know, hip hop history, Bob, it's a phrase that comes up all the time with us and with Tanya and everybody. It's extractive capitalism. I talk to CEOs of companies all the time, and they are expected to have a 12% markup every quarter or every year, whatever it is. It's an impossible scenario for people to be able to, the way it is, the way it currently is. And unless there's a huge moment, and you know, Bob, I was very hopeful that Occupy New York would gain some traction at some point, because that to me was a thing that I thought could have been really, really interesting. And one of the big complaints back then, because we were doing the talk show on CBC back in that day, one of the big complaints was, well, what are they actually mad at? There's so many different signs, there's so many different points of view. What are they actually mad at? And the whole point was, that's the point. That's the point, is that there are a lot of forces working against you that you actually have to put the work into it. We have to put the work into it. We did it in media. And I remember there were some producers we worked with who did not want us to cover it as much as we did. But yeah, we live in a world where people have, like I just did, I was just at a think tank, a Bernie Sanders thing with Bernie Sanders and Jane Sanders. And it was all about social housing and how we need more, not just affordable housing, but social housing for people. And in California particularly, but it's around the world, but in California, the numbers of, like, the tens of thousands of school kids, kindergarten through grade 12, who are homeless, it's shocking. And by the way, 4 to 5 living in a car, and it's not like nobody works. They have a parent who works. They're still working full-time jobs, and they can't actually pay for rent, can't actually get it. And a big problem is, you know, and I think we should burn the hearts out of the people who are the hedge funds who buy up all these properties and the politicians who let them do it, that you shouldn't be allowed to buy up all these homes and turn it into a place where nobody can actually rent and people are living in cars. That's my thought, Bob. Zach, that's my response to that comment.
You know, I'm listening to the last 5 minutes and the evolution of a smart person. David Moscrop writes for the Globe and Mail, and Neil Seth looks like he could bend spoons with his mind. And you and I are the reasons why Grown Ups 2 is the #1 trending movie on Netflix.
No, we're not. Have you watched? I haven't seen Grown Ups 2. Is it good?
It's actually quite good.
Yeah. No.
But, you know, the thing about fame, George, and to
Yeah.
go to unite this back to the Kurt Cobain thing, is you mentioned how many people are doing good things out there. And this is the
Yes.
problem with fame, is that if
Yeah.
people don't see it, we don't think it has value. I think
Right.
there's so many interesting things happening on the grassroots. And I'm not just talking about community organizers, although that's awesome too, but I'm talking just like people who are amateur athletes, people who decide to learn another instrument, people who are good moms and dads.
Yeah.
There are a lot of ways good at life, quote unquote.
Uh-huh.
And we've gotten caught up in this idea that somehow if people aren't watching, it doesn't really count.
Right. It was, and that's the thing at this think tank that I was at. You just see so many
Here's the thing,
amazing work.
But here's the thing, and to go away from this, I think that we can look at this and think of this in the biggest terms possible, which is here's all the macro things that are happening. And it's true, macro things are happening and they do control your life and they do have undue importance, I think, in some ways, undue effect. But most of us live in our communities. Most of us live in our lives. I think one of the ways we get around this is honestly say, yeah, things are pretty screwy, but you know, I can get someone a donut and a coffee if they need one.
Yeah.
Like none of like, again, you know, I kind of feel like maybe I'm Joe Biden's press person here, but
You don't want that
there-
job right
there's
now,
a-
by the way.
Oh, you're right. I definitely don't want that job right now, but I'm probably more of a centrist than you are by nature, I would say. I think, but I also think you get glee out of blowing things up. I think you have a bit of an addiction to chaos. And honestly, like most people don't want to live there. Most people want institutions to be stable. Most people want things to work. I think there's a certain cohort out there that love the idea that, or have this sort of fascination with the worst interpretations of the most fun ones.
I hear
And
you.
it gives life and history meaning. But you know what gives life and history meaning is waking up, doing your best, and going to bed.
Yeah.
That's what gives your life meaning.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I have an addiction.
So
to
I'm
chaos,
not. So
but
I'm not.
okay
I'm
with
not
it.
necessarily disagreeing with you. I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily. But you see this. You say this stuff all the time. Oh, you know, I'm a punk guy and I'm a heavy metal guy,
I just grew up on it. So
I
it
grew up
informed
and
me.
I don't believe in
It informed me.
institutions. And you know, like, look, you dress like Snake from The Simpsons, and you like to talk like you're reading the Communist Manifesto. But for most people, they just want things to work.
Well,
And
to be fair-
sometimes I worry that things can't work if
Yeah.
you decide that working means perfect.
yes, I have read the comments.
And
Of course I have.
too often we allow great to be the enemy of the good.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, by the way, here's what Yasmin says. I don't know, Bob. French Revolution is looking pretty good right now.
Well, you know what? All I can say is this, and I'll leave it at this: is my grandparents came out of
Mhm.
a war.
Mm-hmm.
They came out of a place where people came with tanks and pitchforks.
Yeah.
And said you can't, and they met in a Nazi work camp.
Mhm.
So the other side of these institutions is not like, you know, it's not a rock video on the other side. You know, it's not like some gigantic picnic. Like there are all kinds of ways this gets worse.
Read that comment right there. Snake from The
Ouch,
Simpsons.
Snake from The Simpsons.
I don't think that's an ouch. I'm fine with it. I have read the
You do.
Communist Manifesto. Of course, I'm not a communist, but I definitely have read the Communist Manifesto. Of course. By the way, Jennifer, I got some viewer mail from last week. Jennifer last week said, "Bob is the order, George is the chaos." That's the email that she sent from or response from last week's show.
There's probably some truth to that. By the way, George, did you get that Conan O'Brien clip that I gave you, that I sent?
I have it.
Did
Yeah.
do you have it?
Yeah.
Okay, put it on standby for a second, because there was a story last night that made me think of you. So
Okay.
for the first time since 2010, Conan O'Brien was back at the Tonight Show. Now, for people who might be young to remember the story, it was a huge deal because Conan for like 16 years was the host of the 12:30 show.
Mhm.
Back in the day when the 11:30 show, the Tonight Show, the Jay Leno show was like, you know, being the host of the Tonight Show was like being Mount Rushmore for TV.
Yes. Yeah.
And Conan was really successful, really popular, and they were afraid he was going to go, so they promised him the show. And he had it for 6 months, more or less, and then they gave it back to the first guy, Jay Leno. And I wanted to know, have you ever been in a situation where you got a show and did it for about 6 months, and then behind the scenes, the old guy actually politicked for his job back, and then they wound up giving the job to the old guy? Has that ever happened to you, or do you know anything about that?
I don't know. It doesn't ring any bells, Bob.
You imagine, George, how crazy it would be to have a job of national profile, one of the biggest jobs in the country on TV for 6 months, and then have the old guy get his job back.
I'll tell you though, it's
crazy.
Here's where it's a little different, right? Here's where it's a little different. Here, it's actually quite a bit different. Let's play the clip, and we'll come back and talk about it. This is going to get me in trouble, but I don't care. Wait, no, we don't want that clip. No, we want the Conan clip. Where did I put the Conan clip here? Here it is.
That was a standing ovation. Man, that was, come on, knock it off. That's got to feel good. That's got to feel. You know, I know you meant well, but I had the Tonight Show for 10 minutes, and you just ate into my time.
We'll give you time.
This is all the time I have. Knock it off.
Standing up on this desk, I was almost as tall as you are. You're a very tall
Yes,
individual.
I'm a freak. Yeah, it's not good. I'm a kind of height, and many people have said that that would hurt your career to be that tall. I was told that there were, over the years, guests that might not want to come on, especially male actors that are smaller, because I would tower over them. So it's a true story. What I would do for years, and you can see it on tape, is I would get up from the desk when I introduced, it's Bono from U2, whatever, and I would get up, and I would go like this, and I would greet them, and then I would place them in the chair, and then I would go back.
You pick them up and place
Pick them up.
and put them in the chair. Pat them on the back.
Sometimes a little burp.
That's nice of you.
They've just had their bottle. Who can say?
It's super weird to me that Conan went back and did that. It's super weird to me that he went and did that. Oh, by the way, somebody commented right here, Bam or Biff, Hockey Night in Canada? In case we weren't clear, that's what Bob was referring to when I so Hockey Night in Canada, and then Ron McLean was the host again. That's what it was.
Yes. So how long did you host George Stroumboulopoulos tonight for? It was like 10 years?
Yeah.
10 seasons. Probably, and you can't say this, but I'll say this. It was the most successful, definitely the most important talk show that Canada has ever had. And at the time you were on our Mount Rushmore, you know, and always will be, right? Like there was a certain golden era of television, and you and Mansbridge and Mercer, certainly for the CBC, were right up there. And it was a really important time. So I want to put a pin in that idea of being on a talk show and dealing with celebrities, because God knows you've had your fill. But I wanted to throw out a concept to you, and I'm actually like goofing. I wanted to goof with you about Hockey Night in Canada a little bit, but what's amazing to me is that Conan goes back the winner, that he lost out on the biggest job in television, but since then he's built a podcast company that sold to SiriusXM for $150 million. I've seen estimates on the internet that say he's worth $200 million, and he kind of did it his own way. Like completely his own man, making his own creativity, following his own path. He kind of won the game in a lot of ways. So what does it mean to you to look at this as someone who's done the Fallon job, done the Conan job, to say in 2024, the indie podcaster is way more powerful and interesting than the host of the Tonight Show?
Oh, 100%. There was a time when I was doing the talk show in Canada where I got offered, I was asked if I would go meet with NBC to talk about taking over one of their slots, one of their late night talk show slots. So I went on a few of the flights back and forth, and I would go to NBC and I would meet them. And ultimately, the number 2 guy was really into it. The number 1 guy was not into it. And the number 1 guy finally said to me, he said, look, here's the thing. You can do the job for sure. I have no doubt about that. But there's 2 things. Number 1, nobody knows who you are in the US. So that's an issue for me. I said, yeah, it's fine. That's no problem. But then he said, I can't put another mid-40s white guy on as the host. And I said, totally fair. Like, that's completely legit. And I don't mind that at all. I think that is a very legitimate reason to do it. I was doing the talk show, I guess around year 7.5, year 8, I realized I wasn't watching talk shows on television anymore. I just wasn't watching talk shows. And it's partly because I've seen how the sausage is made, but more importantly, I just didn't think that it was the network television to do that kind of thing was the place anymore. I wasn't doing it. And you know me, you and I have both been, we have had one foot inside, well, many times 2 feet inside the business, but we always talk about, we don't think it's the future. We don't want to be a part of a thing that's yesterday. And so when I remember meeting with the head of CBC at the time, I shouldn't even say this, but I remember meeting with the head of CBC at the time who brought me in. There's a new boss who brought me in and said to me, we were trying to figure out what the contract would be. They said to me, stick around, we're going to figure it out. We'll figure out the deal. But I knew change was going to come. I know. And then she said 2 things to me. Number one, she was obsessed with Gian. She was obsessed with Gian and said as much to me. But the other thing she said to me was, you're not the hot young thing anymore. And I was sitting in this meeting and I was looking at this person. I went, oh, okay. And then here's what's funny. About a week later, I got a text message saying, do you want to work at Hockey Night in Canada? Do you want to be the host of Hockey Night in Canada? So it kind of worked out okay. And I could read the writing on the wall that they were going to go and do what they were going to do. But when I took the Hockey Night gig, you and I talked at great lengths about this, and you were an amazing consigliere for me then and still are. We knew it wasn't going to last. We knew, but we just thought, let's try anyway, because that's part of the fun. So the Conan thing, and what's a little different between Conan and me and Ron, is that when they called me and offered me the job, my first response to them was, you don't want this. You don't want this. You don't want this to Hockey Night. Trust me, you don't want to do this. I know you don't have the stomach for it. I know you don't. Whereas Conan's contract said, I have to get the show. So in a way, Conan's, whoever negotiated his deal, as I understand it, it was very much they orchestrated this move. But you're right when you say this about a lot of things, but specifically this. When Conan went to TBS ultimately, because he left on his terms the Tonight Show, he could have gone back and done the shift, right? He could have gone back. He left into the TBS or TNT show, wherever he ended up. He could tell very early that he was doing bigger online than he was doing on broadcast. And so Conan invested way more in that digital stuff back then. And it was fantastic. And we talked about it, how great Conan stuff was. And you're right in that nobody walks away from a chair and maintains. Nobody does. You get like the car show like Leno has. You get your thing that you do. But nobody walks, Letterman, who's the best, does what he did with the interview series on Netflix. But Conan him and Bill Burr were early on podcasts, early. Conan was transitioning from traditional, and he totally won. He totally won the late night talk show game because he went and built his own thing completely on his terms.
I think that's well said. And people may not know this. I think they know this about you, but you're not just a host. You were always a producer on your shows and had a big hand in shaping them. And a real student of the game. I've always enjoyed talking to you about TV because you really get it. You like to put your hands into the soil of making it. So 2024, where do you see it going next? I feel like we're at peak podcast.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that you can't sell them because Smartless is worth a lot of money. And I don't think they're necessarily going to go away, but it's so top heavy now.
Yeah.
Team Coco was built over 10 years. Well, kind of don't you sort of feel like what we're just doing here is talk show 2024?
I guess it is. At its brass tacks, it is that. It's on camera talking. But I don't think it is. Like, first of all, when we started talking about doing this and planning it out and figuring it out, we were very clear to each other.
Whatever this is.
Yeah. That this isn't a thing. This is just, let's just talk and have fun. I listen to a lot of podcasts. There are about 1.2 million active podcasts in the world. There aren't enough podcasts to actually meet the demand of the podcast listener, which I find fascinating. I think that some of the dollars bottomed out because, as always is the case, there's a rush to get on board and buy, and that business wasn't going to be able to sustain that way. But everybody I talk to says it continues to grow. I want to be clear. To me, this is not a podcast. This is not a podcast. We are a broadcast in many respects, but it is not a podcast. We have a podcast with Apple Music, which is either number 1 or number 2, sometimes number 3, but generally number 1 or number 2 in Canada for music, right? As a podcast, which I think is fantastic. But I do think that it's funny, you use the word indie, and I think indie is really interesting because it is indie in that it's independent, but it's not indie anymore in that it's bigger than broadcasts. the smartless money, Mr. Beast, who has a YouTube channel, advertisers can't pay him what he's worth based on eyeballs. He does bigger than the Super Bowl. They won't pay him double that, right? In terms of a regular content. So I think the indie thing, I actually like this the most is because you and I, here's what I love. So you and I talked, I think we talked on the phone maybe for 2 minutes this morning, and then we didn't really. We went to air, and I'm confident in my abilities and I'm confident in your abilities to just fuck around and see what happens. Part of this is the joy. And so to me, 2024 in this digital thing, I think there's a lot of strength in the contents of our heart and the things that we're curious about, and that we agree on a lot of things and we don't agree on a lot of things. And I just like having a place for me and my bro can talk about it on National Siblings Day. So
Siblings Day.
Yeah. So I don't think that it's, so to direct answer your question, I have no idea what, right? But I do know that when we did this last week, we had fun. And to me, that's the kind of thing. And after all these years, look, I actually genuinely believe this is going to be really big and a lot of people are going to watch it. And I was very surprised how many watched episode 1. I was very surprised how many people watched our Kurt Cobain thing. I really was surprised. I'm genuinely surprised by all the comments. I am genuinely surprised. But my intention is to make this massive for sure, but that's not the only goal, right? I do think that it will become massive because we'll do it the right way. And I think that's something that is going to be a lot of fun. But what do you think about where we are with this?
I've lived through a couple.
Bob produced and ran Off the Record, so my talk show, George Stroumboulopoulos Tonight, and Off the Record were the only 2 nightly talk shows on Canada on television, like regular nightly talk shows.
Yours was good. Look,
yours is pretty great too. Yours is pretty great too.
Mine was sports.
You're an expert, is what I'm saying. You're an expert. So give me your thoughts.
My thoughts are, honestly, I like vibes, and I think that there's a spirit of the age, and what we have now we talk a lot about 1994, and I think you and I came out of the cauldron that was the rise of indie culture in film, in publishing, in music, and there's a certain energy that comes from that. I feel that energy again now, and I think as a heavy metal kid, you would get this. There were a lot of heavy metal bands that were really popular, and nobody knew about them except for the people who loved them. And then people in the mainstream were shocked to discover, wait a minute, Metallica can sell out an arena? Yeah. So I feel like we're in a Metallica phase, to tell you the truth. Remember, Metallica started in what, 83?
Yeah. So now,
and by
now my metal listening is okay for content. Now it's okay for content.
I wasn't disparaging your metal love.
Kate just sent me a message and said, Bob's feisty tonight. That's what # riveted. I love it.
I don't think I'm that feisty. I felt like you were feisty. You were calling for the end of civilization. I was telling you to,
No, I was not.
I did. My grandfather would say, "Hey, cool up."
Listen, I wasn't calling for the end of civilization. I was just playing the end that's already happening. Hey, wait, listen. Do you want to do 94 now, or do you want to? I want to play. I want to do the SkyDog round. I want to introduce you.
Yeah. You know what? I think we should do 94 now, just because we're here. Like you and I've. Ooh.
It's funny, and I'm really glad that was the image that Nathan picked there, because that's that tube. That's that tube amp, the tube breeze PA that was pedal that was used quite a lot by those punk bands in the 90s. 91, Kurt Cobain was the Rat. The Rat was his pedal for sure, but that tube one is a really big one for a lot of the punk bands in the 90s.
1994, we talked already about Kurt Cobain. This was the week that we found out that he passed away, April the 8th. Now, either on April the 8th or April the 11th, I've seen conflicting reports on the internet. But I find this so remarkable because it was the same day that we found out about Kurt Cobain, let's assume it was the 8th, that a record from The Offspring, their third record titled Smash, came out. And it was, at the time, the biggest indie record of all time. I've seen stats where it's 11 million sold, which for an indie record is just absolutely incredible. But this just blows me away. So grunge, I guess, has its Altamont moment, and you say with the death of Kurt, grunge is kind of over. And on the same freaking day, the beginning of the next phase starts. Literally. How weird is that? This like karmic.
Yeah. You know, you talk about how Altamont was the death of Kurt. I think because, and it speaks to his impact, he was creating a space for something like The Offspring to happen. The Offspring's record, I think it even might still be the highest selling indie in a way. And you're right, 11 million is the number. And it's a truly independent record. They put it out on Epitaph. I believe because of the success of Smash, big labels offered tens of millions, 30 million at one point is a number I heard that were offered to Epitaph for them to buy Epitaph just so they could get that record. Just so they could get that record. That's a label that has great bands. You know, one of our favorites, Rancid. But the Offspring Smash, in a way, caught everybody by surprise. I've talked to Noodles about this. It caught him by surprise. I've talked to Dexter. It caught him by surprise. They did not think this was going to work.
Well, and why would they? Because it had never really worked before. But suddenly, Green Day, February the 1st, Dookie comes out that same year, 1994. The world is ready to split, oddly enough.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this on the Apple Show about how grunge had kind of run its course and had become corporate rock in one way. So new music was either going post-grunge or it was going pop-punk.
Right.
And pop-punks won the chart battle because, of course, they would. They had great songs. Like, I think about The Offspring. Like, they're not my band. I think of them the way I think of the show Everybody Loves Raymond. I recognize something well-made that's enjoyable, but I would never say, God, I'm glad I got to live during a time of Everybody Loves Raymond.
You didn't like, you weren't that into The Offspring?
I recognized quality.
Yeah.
But it wasn't for me. You know, here's the thing. I wasn't even that into Nirvana because, as the great band Sloan once said, it's not the band I hate, it's the fans. Like, it kind of felt like if you were going to get it wrong, this was going to be the soundtrack to do it to, which wasn't the band's fault.
Night, thank you very much. Tube Screamer was the thing, but I get it. But now, as time has gone on, when you hear those Offspring records, what do you think?
Oh, actually, I like them more with time. And I actually like Green Day more with time. Well, because at the time I was like a snotty kid. Like, who wants to like the thing that everybody likes? If everybody likes it, well, then you don't get to be different by liking it. And what's more important than being different when you're 19 years old?
But in 1994, you hadn't yet gone to England to call me and tell me about the Oasis record you heard. So in 1994, while I was listening to Nirvana and Tupac, what were you listening to?
A lot of acid jazz and a lot of... and a lot of old soul music. Like, I was just kind of off the radar, really. You know what really jumps out at me, though, as we talked this week in 94, though, and I think the essence of it is indie culture and why this matters now. Like, we've talked about how the 90s are kind of having a revival moment, and that's partially just like cycles of history. Like, you know, post-punk is having a revival moment. But I honestly think spiritually, because of the internet, because of the dissolution of mainstream institutions, particularly the media, people are having to figure it out for themselves. And that was so much what the early 90s was like. Bands were figuring out, wait a minute, maybe I don't need a record label. Maybe I'm going to do all this myself. Zines, like people were saying, magazines are really expensive to make. I'm going to make my own. And you would go down to Kinko's with a couple bucks and start mimeographing stuff. So I kind of feel like, and in a weird way, that's kind of why I like hanging out with you during this time, is it reminds me of my early band rehearsals where we had no idea what anything was going to be. But we knew it was going to be more than nothing. Let's see what that means.
I like that.
I think we all need to embrace this, though. Like, honestly, most people in your lives, in your jobs, whether it's AI or somebody who's younger, who makes half the cash and doesn't expect to get benefits and is willing to work for a contract, like, all of this certainty is, I don't want to say it's gone, but it's certainly being tested. It's a good time to find that independent voice within you. And honestly, I think it makes you a better person. You know, I really do.
Somebody commented about when do we talk about, what we talked about off the top, but when we talk about being happy as opposed to being sad, right, which is something we had promoted. And I think this is a big part of it. And it's kind of a theme that's running through the show, this idea that you have, like, listen, you have to fight the system for sure. We have to fight the system. You can't do it alone. You can't change the world. But a lot of it is that independent spirit of maybe we can do it if we do it a different way. Maybe
I actually think a lot of, without telegraphing it, I think most of this show has been about how do you be happy when the world prefer you to be sad. Because the conversation you had with David Moscrop was about all the invested interests that are like Mindful masturbation the solution? Yeah, it's always been the solution. Always. In every generation, that's always been the answer.
That's always been the way.
Always.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We don't really want to telegraph it. Hold on, Michelle just said this. In '94, I was listening to Barney with a 4-year-old. See, this is one of the reasons why I never wanted to have kids, right? One of the reasons is because I understand that to be a good parent, you do probably have to spend some time listening to kids' music, and I didn't think I could do it because if I ever, something happened to me and I died and I was listening to a kid's record at the end, I would have been mortified. I would have been mortified by it.
The lowest level of hell,
Yeah.
and every parent knows this, is when your kid falls in love with something that really sucks.
Did you go through it with your daughter?
Oh my God, yes. Yes. And I still do, but now I can leave her alone. She's a teenager now. I can just walk into the room. But you have to be in the room with them because they're like self-destructive little machines that can kind of half walk. They need supervision. And no kid says, oh, I liked that. Well, that's good enough for me.
Yeah. No, totally.
One time was enough.
Oh my God, it sounds like hell. Anything else happened in '94 that you're interested in? We could do this every week, by the way, because I believe 30 years ago, 1994 might have been, I don't know if it's 91 or 94, which is the best year for the release of this stuff, but 94 is kind of insane what came out that year. And we did a whole special on the Apple Music Show, which you can find on our podcast page.
Yeah, we'll do more of them too. Now I would just say the transition from Kurt's passing to Offspring happening on the 8th is kind of outrageous. And I would add to that, honestly, the bridge between those two bands. This band has its flowers, but you can never give them enough. It proves how important the Ramones were because the Ramones taught Nirvana how to play and Offspring. And you can actually trace their lineage, both bands, in very different ways back to the Ramones. So all those guys, it's amazing because I don't think their record went gold for like 40 years.
A long time. Luann says singing the Wiggles in a bar with other drunk parents is now fun. Oh my God. I don't know if that's
Luann,
true. That's true.
Luann, I'm going to disagree with you. The other circle of hell, it's a little higher than the stuff your kid likes, is other parents. Because you have to kind of like them. Your kid's friends with their kids, you want it to go well. And the first 2 or 3 times you find like really neutral topics to discuss back and forth. Oh, schools. Yeah, schools have changed so much. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, schools have changed so much. Or the third one, it's like, well, I wouldn't necessarily vote for that guy. I mean, I guess it's the fascism and racism that worries me. Like, other parents are hell. If you find a family that you can get along with, treat them like gold. Never let them go. They should have today's National Siblings Day.
Yeah.
They should have a national acceptable other parents day.
Right. That's pretty good, actually. They do. It's called Swingers Night. I think, right? Luann said that I mentioned the Wiggles were performing before.
No, they actually do some really great. They do a great cover of the Special Monkey Man.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. Lovely.
You know how I know that, George? Because I know everything they've done.
Yeah.
My feeling is always those like kids bands are perverted, and I can't prove this, but there's just something about like kids entertainers that feels like Death to Smoochie weird to me. Some jobs I don't think you can be normal and do.
Dude, you know that it's been 30 years since I drank, but before, when I used to drink, I was living with these dudes. We lived in this place in Malton, and our TV didn't have sound. So we didn't have sound. We had a broken garbage TV, right? Like from the garbage. So it didn't have sound. And ironically, the place was pretty low rent. We called it Trump's because it was the epitome of, grandeur. So that played out all right, right? That played out all right. And so our TV didn't have sound. And you know me, you love musicals. I hate musicals. And I would come home and they'd be watching Grease with no sound and I couldn't do it. And then as our, our usage of stuff evolved, I would come home from work. I was working at a movie theater as an usher, and they were watching Barney on this TV with no sound. And Barney on a TV with broken sound is pretty gnarly. And that's when I finally sat down, and I might have had a few in me, and I was just like, I don't think this is normal. I think the people who make the show make it without sound on purpose, and then they add it.
There is a show, and I encourage everybody to go look at this show if you like drugs. It's called In the Night Garden.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really have any dialogue. It's just like these weird little claymation characters that beep and boop to each other.
Mhm.
And my wife and I would watch this while my kid was watching it. My kid was watching it because she was 18 months old and there's a lot of bright colors. But Sandra and I entered some kind of Kubrickian time warp when we watched this thing. Like, it was just like, it would feel like reality was melting, like the clocks in a Dali painting. It was In the Night Garden. And I am convinced that if we do some research, we're going to find out that it is a CIA experiment.
Now you're starting to sound like me, bro.
Mind
Now you're
control.
starting to sound like me. Last thought on 1994, by the way. This is from Rakesh, also released in 94. Donkey Kong Country for this was it has one of the okay, I said yeah. For the Super Nintendo, yeah. One of the greatest video game soundtracks of all time. So there we go. All right, so Bob, I think I should hit this button again because it was so fun to do it. I do quite like that, actually. I do quite like that. I think it's kind of funny. I think it's funny. What were you going to say, Bobby?
Well, I was just going to say I loved 1994 because I didn't know what was going to happen yet.
Yeah, that's right. We didn't know. We didn't know.
That was
Okay,
great.
so I want to go to a place that we actually do know what was going to happen because we've already done it. It's a piece of, it's just like a file I've got loaded up here. I want to spin for you. So off the top of the show, we talked about, finding happiness, of course, in a world that wants to make you sad. And one of the ways that I think I've found for me has been really great is animals. And I don't just mean, I love dogs and I love that kind of thing, but I know a lot of friends of mine who have gone to use equine therapy to feel better about life and stuff. And I've never done that, but I sort of feel connected to horses in a strange way anyway. So I wanted to go to this ranch, and Tanya was just reaching out relentlessly to the SkyDog Ranch people in Malibu to see if they would actually let us go there and take a look at what they had in store. And it was pretty remarkable, and I want to spin it for you right now. Take a look at this.
One of the narratives we're really trying to change is that a horse's worth or value is only based on a job it can do for a human. Trying to just get people to fall in love with them just for themselves as being fellow souls on this earth who are not doing any harm to anyone, and that you really can form a relationship and a bond with them, and I think that's one of the most beautiful things.
This is a place I've been wanting to take you to for a long time. This is the SkyDog Ranch, a sanctuary in Malibu, saving horses and donkeys and pigs and just letting them be the beauties and kind of the wild beauties that they've always been. This is one of our tour guides. This is Cisco. Get you buckskin. You want snacks. Why'd you start this place?
I had just met my husband, and his mother had a massive love of horses. So I kind of said to my husband, your mom loved horses. It's because of her, you have everything that you have. I think we should honor her by helping some horses. That was the way I sold it to him. And then it grew out of that. When I very first started, I kind of felt like Mustangs are rock stars. Yeah. So I had Jagger and Johnny Cash and David Bowie. We have all these horses that are called after rock stars. And I never saw us growing as big as we are now with as much support, but it was almost like, I kept saying that Kevin Costner film, Build It and They Will Come. I just kept thinking, okay, I'm just going to keep going and doing this, and I'm going to trust that the universe will support this if we keep showing them over and over again the level of care these horses get. And, it's kind of worked out that way, and now we're...
Right. This is a field of dreams, for sure. This really is. We're so busted up as a culture anyway, as humans, and heavily conditioned. I think there's something really interesting about places like this so that people can realize that there's something about being in harmony with other living things that has a bigger impact. Not everybody has the opportunity, right? Especially kids in cities, I grew up in inner cities. You don't, like I told you before, I only met horses that were cops. So no idea that you could be this close. And as I became older, I was able to be around them. This is a different life.
Yeah.
Horses and donkeys, how do they grieve?
Oh my gosh, actually, that is the craziest question that you would ask. This gray donkey here, his name is Charlie Brown, and he came to us with a horse called Marley, who was 32 when we rescued him, so we knew he wasn't going to be with us forever. Marley and Charlie Brown just made best friends, and they lived together up in the donkey barn. When Marley passed away, Charlie Brown went into a really bad depression. There was a horse up in Oregon, I'll never forget, her name was Vegas, and she was just in one pasture with this horse called Reed, and he had this massive ingrown halter injury, so you could actually see into his nasal passages. It's kind of completely open, and he's an amazing Mustang. When Vegas passed away in the morning, I looked out because literally their pasture wraps around my house. Reed hadn't come to breakfast, and we were like, where's Reed? And we went around, and he was just standing, just like a soldier above her body. She was laying there, and he stood there right until we took her body away. And then we actually did something so sweet. We brought mares past his gate, and most of them he rejected, and he was like, no, not that one, you know. And then we brought him Blue, who's this beautiful Mustang with a white blaze and blue eyes, and he was like all about, yes, there's my new lady love.
He moved on quickly.
Yes, he did. He moved, well, I'm sure he took his time to move, but just the way he stood with her, you know, she was like 35 years old, and they definitely can let go and move on much better if they see. You know, whereas if a horse disappears to the vet, they're maybe calling for them and hoping, you know, they don't know. But if ever we've had to euthanize a horse here because of old age or you know, they colicked or they are suffering in any way, we will always bring their friends just to see. And they look and they just put their nose down and they understand, then they'll just turn away immediately. You know, it's kind of like, oh, I understand, and then they can move on. You know, they accept death better than we do, I think. It's not a fear, it's just a part of life and nature, and they definitely understand it.
This is pretty much identical to the necklace I wore at Much Music for all those years. Like it actually is.
I think we're raised with this idea of changing the world. I don't think you can change the world because the world's something else. But I think you can have impact and live a vital life, and maybe that's pretty great to be able to do that.
It's so true.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think I loved going there and hanging out with those horses, dude?
31.
Oh, it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable, man.
There must be people who are skeptical about animal emotions, but there's no way they don't have emotions. I think everything she was saying, I mean, it might be her interpretations. It's obviously her interpretations. It's going to be interesting is when AI allows us to figure out what animals are saying to each other, then I think our relationship to animals is really going to change.
I think you're exactly right. And, you know, there are organizations, I've met a couple of cats who are working, not actual cats, people, but one day it could be cats, people who are working on using language processing models, language models to understand whales. And they've got to a point now where they can identify that a whale is saying their name or essentially identifying themselves, but also identifying the clan they're from. We're already getting really close to that. And you hear a lot about it, you know, little kids, especially you hear, and I've seen it, you know, my friends' daughters, the little girls, they start crying when they see an animal on a menu, when they can identify that lamb is a lamb, and they start crying. That's going to happen to a lot more adults when we start to realize that they know themselves with names.
Yeah, the second you have a name, really, I mean, we tend to anthropomorphize things. Of course we do, because our brains work symbolically, but it's not so much that they're like people. It's like they're themselves.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going to really mess us up is that they're, you know, and man, horses, I don't know if I have a better word for it right now, but they're strange to me.
Yeah.
I feel like they have a deep inner life that we don't understand completely.
They're enormous and they're prey, as she said. So they are afraid of everything, and they are, because they have to be. But when you actually hang around and don't ask them to do anything, it's remarkable. Even those horses, we were only there for a few hours. Even the way those horses interact with us, they're curious. It's really amazing. It's actually one of the things that I love the most about becoming older is carving out time, because I'm in a privileged position that I can carve out time to go. Like, I'm going to go spend a day at a ranch up here. I get that. So I love it. Oh, here's what Candace is saying. Candace is saying that pigs are also highly intelligent. Bacon was the first thing to go for me. Like, I'm the last person you could ever have imagined that would go plant-based as an eater, the last one. But that's what took
my wife too, actually. She used to be on the highway, and she'd be driving up to work, and every Wednesday there would be a pig truck, one of those cargo trucks that would take pigs from one spot to another, and they always wound up in traffic together.
Yeah.
So she would be sitting next to the pigs who were on their way to slaughter, and that was it. She was done.
Just staring at her. Okay, Bob, before we've already been on for an hour 45. We'll do a little bit more if there's other things. But there's something I read this morning. It's one of the first things I read this morning that I wanted to share with you. Hold on, let me see if I can do this here. Let's cut to this right now. Hold on, let me do this. So this thing to me is, see if you can read this. Can you read
Anthony
that?
Hopkins played King Herod alongside newcomer Noah Cohen in biblical thriller.
Apparently, they're making a thriller. Apparently, they're making a thriller movie of King Herod and Jesus's mom, Mary. I just thought, and Anthony Hopkins is going to play Herod as he's getting paranoid and kind of unraveling as gets older.
The Bible is lit. Those stories are so wild, and they had to be to survive. But when you really stop and think about it, it's people on the run, and it's armies chasing the innocent, and yeah, it's lit.
What would you be most excited about from the King Herod Mary story as a thriller?
Well, first of all, I don't know who they cast as Mary, but I imagine it's going to come down to how seriously it takes the tone. Like, is it one of these biblical thrillers? Like, is it going to be like Left Behind starring Kirk Cameron? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Right.
But that's always a hard thing for these biblical things to do, because they know their audience is super religious, so they don't want to be offensive in any way. But then that allows the source material to be like, you have to treat it so reverentially. Sometimes it gets in the way of the story, and things become a little on the nose and literal. Martin Scorsese is still apologizing for The Last Temptation of Christ. Salman Rushdie was stabbed for the Satanic Verses. Like, if you want to talk about someone's religion, it's always dangerous territory.
It really is. I'm excited about it. I wonder if I'll get my mother back into movie theaters, though. My mother doesn't go to see movies. My mother, as you know, is very, very faith-based.
I remember her review of The English Patient. She went and saw it, and you said, do you remember what her review of The English Patient was?
Too much adultery. That was my mother's review of The English Patient, was that there was too much adultery. Hey, I'm going to play just a little bit of this, and I want you to tell people about it, because when you used to host the morning show on CBC Radio 2, I remember when you played this song, but this is I think really fascinating.
There are quite a few stories about your background.
Okay, would you like some of the wilder ones?
Geffen said, you gotta go see this girl, Judee Sill. I said, what's she like? And he said, she's like nobody else.
She was the first artist signed to Asylum Records, and Geffen had tremendous belief in her.
He said, what do you want to do? And I said, I wanted to be the greatest living songwriter in the world.
I heard the song, and it was very intriguing, because I thought it could be a hit.
We liked each other's songs, like I love Jackson's songs that he wrote, and I love J.D.'s songs, but everybody seemed to think that Judee had something special.
When I met her, she told me she was a heroin addict, that she'd been a prostitute, and that she'd been in jail, so that's a lot of information.
She had pointed the gun at the guy and said, okay, mother sticker, this is a fuck up.
I knew that I had to clean up or else go back to jail, so I got a tattoo on my arm to remind me forever, and then I started formulating exactly what my mission would be.
This is the kid.
Bobby, this is a movie being made on Judee Sill.
It's going to come out. I don't know if it's wide release. It's going to be in select markets for sure on April the 12th. So I can't wait to go see it. Judee Sill somehow fell through the cracks of history. I mean, I think she had a moment in which she was elevated around, like Joni Mitchell and the singer-songwriters of California, but we don't really remember her.
Mm-hmm.
But she's freaking brilliant. And her music is like there are other great musicians, so I don't mean like other people suck compared to her, but there's nobody like her. Like she just created her own language out of folk music and Bach choral music and sacred music. One of the things I love about your career is that you connect people to stuff. And I think people have a very close relationship with your opinions and tastes and things. And, you do a really good job of connecting people to good things. And if we can connect people to Judee Sill, if like 10 people walk away from this, check her out, that'd be a win.
Yeah. And in fact, speaking of, on our show today, we leaned into the brothers and the sisters and the family members on our Apple Music show because it was National Sibling Day. But the other thing that we talked a little bit, I want to see if I can find this here for you. But on that other thing that we talked about was the Jane and Serge, because it's the anniversary of Jane Birkin and Serge Gainsbourg's song, I believe, being banned by the BBC because it was a little bit, the moaning and groaning in the song that Jane does so beautifully. They really thought it was the two of them having sex.
In fairness, though, the BBC banned a lot of stuff.
Oh my God, the BBC banned so much. Hundreds of songs have been banned by the BBC, not all for good reasons.
A Day in the Life.
Yeah.
Because I want to turn you on. I'd love to turn you on.
Well, that's the same reason. Well, this song would have turned you on. So I know that Jane Birkin and the Bags and Serge Gainsbourg, of course, you know them, but not everybody may have come across this music. This stuff is so great. Je t'aime mon emploi. Today's not the anniversary of it being released. Today might be the anniversary of it being banned. I can't remember, but we played that on the show today. We love sharing these kind of music stories.
I sense, I have known you a long time, that you probably think that we're going to wrap up soon. So before we do that, I want to show.
Dude,
I want to do the kilometer thermometer with you.
I have forgotten to order food. I haven't eaten yet, so I've forgotten to order food. And I'm looking at during that video, I was thinking, man, maybe I'll order some food, but I'm not going to order any food. So I got nowhere. Wait, you want to do the kilometer thermometer? Is that what you said?
I do. From the home office in Toronto, quick stories
do you
about
mean
Canada.
This. Is that what you mean, the kilometer thermometer? Is that what you mean?
I want to watch that over and over every day of my life. Can you do it one more time?
Yeah, hold on. Let me play for you again. Hold on.
Work you would find in a sex dungeon.
You know what I did? I went into a Bing Image Creator and I said, I want a picture that has city and nature like Canada, but I want you to do it in a weird group of 7 style painting. And they came up with a few options, and that was the one that seemed to work the best. I like that. Kilometer thermometer to me is it, because I actually believe that ultimately we're going to end up just doing tons of Canadian news because I do think it's important. And I think the election's coming in. It's not partisan news, just like this idea that focus on what's really happening out there. So I love talking about what's happening in Canada. Not always just politics, but all kinds of stuff. What do you got?
Well, what do you got? I'm going to do a quick list. All right. First up, I want to talk about PVRs. And if you're in America, that's a DVR. Bell announced to its 5 customers that in just a few weeks, May the 1st, that they're going to have less time to watch their shows on PVR. It used to be it would be a month, or I should say a year, before they were erased automatically. It's now going to be 60 days. And I'm offended.
That is such a garbage decision. That is
okay.
Such
First
a
of all,
garbage decision.
I don't know how, but I'm assuming Bell can make money by doing this. But you know what this really reminded me of?
Not to its 5 customers, to its 5 customers.
I saw that. That was actually pretty funny. It reminded me of how you think you own stuff, but you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like I buy the TV, I pay for the cable, I tape the stuff, but I don't actually own it. Somebody else owns it, and it's just in my house. And I thought about the weird relationship we have with stuff these days. Music. Streaming has been amazing for me. I found a ton of new bands, but I don't own any of it. I have a strange relationship with it, and especially because we grew up in an era of vinyl. I don't know. How do I relate to this? Can go away. Renting, Uber, like all these things in our lives, we actually don't, and probably more and more as we go into the future, aren't going to own things. So I actually looked at this and I thought, this sounds like just some silly whatever, 60 days versus a year. But I looked at this and I thought, fuck, like I give money and I don't own anything.
You don't own anything. I know a guy, I met him, amazing guy. I met him at Burning Man. What he's been doing has been collecting as many copies of DVDs and laser discs as he can, because he notices that there are lots of films. Who do we just have? I just interviewed him for the Black Keys for the radio show, which is you're gonna be able to hear the Black Keys interview tomorrow on our Apple Music show. And one of the things we were talking about the Black Keys was when we were kids, so many records that we loved were out of print. And one of the great things of the proliferation of the digital world is you can find things that were heretofore out of print, including on YouTube or on streamers or wherever you would find them. So, but I know a guy who said to me, he's like, there's no way that's going to stay. They're just going to, the way they fix endings, they rewrite books, all that stuff that happens because of how cultures change. So he's buying up. My friend Todd might end up having the greatest collection of movies in the world because nobody owns any of them anymore. Nobody owns any of them. I have tons of vinyl and I have tons of CDs still locked away in some storage facility, but I don't have my movies. I don't know where any of my movies went.
I looked at my PVR and it's like a record of the person I'm trying to be. Because I only tape things that I think I'm going to watch that are going to make me smart. Like there's a documentary on electricity, and here's a French art film, and there's a reason they've been there for a year. Is because I know I should watch those, but it's like vegetable crisper where you go out and you shop and you get like, I'm gonna have all these vegetables, and then after a week there's like a green goo in the bottom of your crisper because you ate chips all week long.
But dude, I'm a big believer that, we've already established that tonight, that there are people there are just films that'll just be taken away, shows that'll just be taken away, and you'll have to rely on the old bootleg world again, YouTube, of course, being one of the bootleg situations, but they crack down on it. So the bootleg world is going to be the only place to get it. So thank you to that company, Bell, for doing that. And you're right, they probably did it because they found money, because they didn't want to have all the hard drive space they need to have.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Quickly here, the White Horse Star, after 124 years of serving up news in the North, is going to shut down. 17th is going to be its last day. And, it's a small little paper, and it's going away for the reason that all the papers do. It's, declining circulation, and ad dollars are going to the internet. But I looked it up, and look, don't quote me on this, but this sounds right. This is half-assed internet research, but in the last 15 years, 516 local news outlets have been shut across Canada. And that's, of course, TV stations and radio stations and local publications. And I know people have it out for the CBC. I understand why they could be mad at the CBC. I totally do. I understand why people are mad at the mainstream media, but the dissolution of local news is going to kill communities. And really, like, the desire to have information isn't going to go away. We're just going to replace it with worse information. It's like everything's going to be like McDonald's, like the Big Mac version of information. So I look at this and I think, you know what? This sucks.
I think there is a lot. I agree with you. There are a lot of reasons to be upset with mainstream media. I think many people who are upset at the mainstream media, I think what they really mean is the corporate media, but the mainstream media is problematic for sure. But it's like democracy, right? We'll miss it when it's gone, kind of thing. And you need strong independent voices, strong print, strong journalism. And of course, these people, dude, journalism is what helps to change legislation. Journalism is what helps to make things safer. Journalism is what helps to make things better. And I know local news, local TV, has its, oh, cat in a tree kind of vibe, but it holds a really important role in our society. And when journalism goes away, we will miss it because we'll lose a lot of other things alongside it.
Story number 3, Vince Carter, former Toronto Raptor, voted to the Basketball Hall of Fame. I want you to read exactly what he wrote.
This time with Bob today. What a pleasure it was to hang out with Bob on the show today.
Yeah, read what I wrote.
What did you write? I can't read it. What is it?
Can you actually see it? There
Vince
it is.
Carter.
Vince,
Yeah.
There we go.
Who cares? Boy, you and I can hold a grudge, can't we?
Quit on the team. It's the number one thing. All right. A couple of military stories. And this is like, I'm going to get to a point here, so just bear with me for a second. So the federal government pledged $8 billion over 5 years in military spending, $73 billion over 20 years. Good luck with that. Well, that'll never be seen. It was a plan called Our North, Strong and Free. The more interesting story, I thought, was that recruitment is way down. So they're trying to launch a new program to get people to recruit, better family housing, childcare, things like that. 15K shortfall in terms of recruits, which I find kind of interesting because in an era where it's harder and harder to have a career, people clearly don't see the military as one. I want to get to a point, but before I do that, a true or false question for you, Georgie. True or false? You actually were at one point in the military.
True. Very true. Very a little bit shorter tenure than my time in Hockey Night in Canada, but
you must have been a hell of a soldier.
Did you know? But yes, I was in the military, in the reserves. But did you know, Bob, that I didn't know this, but it was part of the reason why I joined when I learned this was that when in the mess hall they had a bar there, and a beer was $1.25. This is in the 80s, early 90s. It was $1.25 for a beer, and it was $2.25 or $2 for a mixed drink. It just seemed like it was absolutely worth it at the time. I could be Blotto, because even though I do look like Snake from The Simpsons, I was more like Otto, and I could definitely see the value in that kind of deal.
This bus smells like Otto's jacket. I have to admit, one of my questions was, what were you thinking? But I suppose the answer is you weren't. $2.50 for a highball and $1.50 for a beer.
It's exactly right. Exactly right. R.I.P. Gord. I was bored. I had no future. Could never afford university. Wasn't going to go to university. Didn't want to do anything. I was a dick. And I was in high school. And one day in our cafeteria, the military showed up to recruit us, and I joined on a dare. That's it. The military they invited the military into my high school cafeteria, which, by the way, was just a Catholic school. And when you start to unpack all that, but one of my teachers, who was actually quite lovely, was a member of this regiment. And turns out that was the one that showed up. And so when I joined, I was on a dare. And I realized very quickly that I wasn't what you call military material. It wasn't my vibe. But that was why I joined back in the day. But I had no future. Like I had no job prospects. And so so to me, it was the only way that I thought, well, maybe if I did this, I could maybe make a little bit of money and have a job and go somewhere. That's kind of what I thought.
Now, I should be totally clear that I am not super pro military, but I'm certainly not against it. And I think that a country has to have a robust one. So here's what I'm going to suggest, because everybody's like hand-wringing about how do we get more soldiers. I would like to see the military, or the idea, more importantly, of national defense, expand its definition of what it means to actually defend the nation. Right now, it means missiles and ships and planes and surveillance to a certain degree. When it comes to national defense, though, I would love to see things like community infrastructure belong. Like, why couldn't tree planting be something that was a reservist's job? And why couldn't helping at-risk youth be a reservist's job? And what if all of this were sort of collated under an umbrella of 2 years of voluntary national service? I wouldn't say it would be necessary, but it would be something that kids would be encouraged to do between high school and university. And if you did 2 years of national service, at the end of it, your university would be paid for.
Who sounds like the communist now? Yes. 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 Yeah.
Right.
Listen, I remember when I was at CBC and Much Music, I was touring across Canada a lot, and one of the things I used to always make fun of was when was it Mayor Lastman called in the military to help shovel out when we had a big snowstorm.
Yeah.
And I remember saying on stage, that's what they should be doing. As I was a reservist, that's what we should be doing. We shouldn't be out there, because when I joined, the Persian Gulf War started, and very quickly they were talking about sending us over there to fight for some oil bullshit. No way, that's not what a military operation should be doing, fighting garbage wars for corporate interests. So I think you're absolutely right. I wish we didn't need to have those kinds. I wish that our taxes covered it, but that's step by step, bit by bit. And I think
It's funny.
right.
People are obsessed with the military. People are obsessed with defense spending. And, there's a lot of corporate reasons why that is. And I also think there's a lot of cultural reasons that are tied into like patriarchy and machismo and things like that too. But what if we stopped looking at national defense as soldiering and we looked at it as helping? And at the end of that helping, which I think would actually help us to be better Canadians, because what would be better than going into another community and learning how other people live? I mean, we're so freaking big. If you live in the Maritimes, it's really hard to relate to Alberta, and there's 2,500 kilometers between you. How could you not be a little bit distanced from it? But here's the other thing. You know what helped to build America as much as anything else was the GI Bill. The GI Bill at the end of the Second World War meant that soldiers could come back and go to school for free. And so a lot of young people came back and they learned the trades, or they got a job, or they got an education that could help them to get a white collar job, and they didn't have to pay for it. That's the thing. Didn't have to pay for it.
In Samstone, John Prine wrote a beautiful lyric, right, where he traded his house that he bought with the GI Bill for a flag-draped casket on a local hero's hill.
Oh, man, that's a heartbreaking line.
Yeah, because that GI Bill got him, but what ended up happening was there were no services to take care of these poor kids who came back, who were devastated, trauma, all of that.
Well, and, of course, I'm giving a bit of a pie in the sky version of this, but I will say, though, anything that helps more kids go to school, particularly, if it can help build some kind of national identity, I would prefer to see us invest some imagination into what the concept of national defense could look like.
I agree. Heavy Mental Show says not anymore. It's $2,000 a month for a bachelor apartment in the Maritime State. That's wild.
That's fucking nuts.
Nuts. And by the way, you're talking about, how to stay happy in a world that makes you sad. And you keep asking why we chose to title the episode this way, because it's the conversation and feeling like there are people who either agree with you or disagree with you and challenge you and push it. That's one way that we stay, not by being stuck in silos and not by by having honest conversations about how we feel. So it's definitely, there are no breaks in Canada anymore, which is what they went on to say, which is not 100% true, but it's more true than it's not. So it might as well be 100% true, right? Because the occasional break that you get, one day we'll have a whole bunch of conversations on here about affordable housing and social housing and the difference between the two and why they aren't happening. Because I hear an awful lot of people talk today about the upcoming election in Canada as it relates to housing and the housing crisis. I guarantee you, it's not going to get better if we keep on this path. I guarantee you, it's not going to get better if we keep on this path.
Well, I kind of chided you earlier for being a bit of a pessimist, but the truth is the incredible extraction of wealth from the middle class to the upper class, I think, has a lot of people going, wait a minute. And of course, like, nobody ever took care of the lower class.
No one ever
so,
does. Yeah.
And it's just getting bigger, right?
Yeah.
But, and I do want to end this on a positive note, if we are in fact wrapping up, which we don't have to. I've got time.
Are you done with Canadian news?
I am done with the Kilometre Thermometre.
I just had to do it. I just had to do it one more time for you. Listen, man, I'm having so much fun doing this. I know that this to me is really fun. We have this Apple show. We get to mess around and talk about this kind of stuff. We're getting lots of lovely response. Like I said, we'll build something out of this eventually, but this to me is a blast talking about all this. I'm learning too. Hopefully you're learning. We're all trying to learn some shit together.
What did you learn today?
That I really do look like Snake. That's the problem. That I didn't
You really do. Like honestly, but like Snake's got like the primo lid in all of animated television.
Yeah, I definitely have my hair. I did not know this was going to happen when I got older. I expected lots of things to happen when I was getting older, but what I did not expect to happen, Bob, is rockabilly was going to wrap its warm arms around me in terms of a look. I did not expect that. And even when I put my hair in different ways, it goes back. This is just what it is for me now, right? And I just sort of have to acknowledge that this is a little bit of who I am.
I think it looks great on you. I love it. You know, I said to my wife, I'm going to drop a couple pounds. What are you going to do when I look good again? And she said, I've got time to think about it.
It's going to take a minute. That's the lovely Bob Mackowycz over here. The lovely Bob Mackowycz, the Parkdale Panther, for sure. Are you using Instagram at all now? If people want to holler at you, or are you not using it?
You know what? I'm going to go back on Instagram. I was off it for a couple of years, but I think I'm going to go back on it. Well, producer Tanya, who works with us, said something that really inspired
Much
me.
to her chagrin, by the way. Yes.
But she said something that really inspired me, and that was, you know, I was decrying social media and all the stupid things it is, and she said, you know, but there's some of it's really good. And I thought,
yeah.
So instead of complaining about the bad shit, go make some good stuff. So it makes me want to get back there and do some good stuff.
She's right about that. I do have one Canadian thing I want to show it, but I do want to play this clip here before we head out, because Patty Astor passed away. Patty Astor was like the queen of the Lower East Side, the queen of the East Village in New York City, an absolute legend in the early days of graffiti. She was all about it. And I know that Bob and I have both seen this film. Some of you may still have it on VHS, but Wild Style. Remember how culturally important Wild Style was to us when it came out? And in that, it was just everything. And it was taking marginalized voices that were silenced, people who had no presence in media in any way except to be the tragic headline or some skewed crime report. And Wild Style started to bring this vibe back to it. And Patty was a real champion of it. And in Wild Style, if you don't know, she played the reporter. Let me just play.
Oh, shit. Oh, what the hell is that? Who are those kids?
It's like the wrecking of a car.
Oh, shit,
watch
no.
that be our reporter. Hello, I'm here.
It's about time.
I'm sorry I'm so late. My car broke down. I got lost. I got a lot of help, though. Wow, what a great mural. And how you doing? This is the Union.
Hello.
My crew.
Yeah, I'm Dave. How you doing?
Crash and Kaz over there.
How did you get started painting graffiti?
Young. It was hard.
At an impressionable
I was scared,
age.
but I got over.
You just pick it up. It's like a virus.
These guys came into the scene and just started hanging out with them. Got to love graffiti, the trains.
She got on the job.
Aren't you scared to be a girl and do it? How long did it take you to paint this wall?
And we just came like in the morning. It took us like about 4 hours to paint it.
We got quite a few jobs lined up. Store gates, signs. We're trying to do a lot for the community now. We're
trying to help out the community.
Yeah. Trying to like liven up a few things.
An absolute legend in the art scene. Fab Five Freddy, Keith Haring, Basquiat were all at an art gallery that she helped kickstart called Fun. And she just was one of these incredible legends who is no longer around. But we just thought we'd shout out a little Patty Astor because fun can be meaningful too.
You weren't on your audio for the first little part.
I turned the mic on and repeated it.
and I could have signaled, but I wanted to do an experiment for myself. Is he more interesting if he more interesting if I can't hear him?
Like Barney?
But here's the thing. No, actually, you're more interesting when you can be heard.
No, all I do is I turn the mic on, and because I got the mic on the side here. I'm from radio, so the mics are usually in front of me, but this time it's on the side. So if I don't see it, I don't see it, you know. But anyway, the point being that Patty was just this really important figure in the art scene and the cultural scene, and shone a light on people who wouldn't otherwise get it. And her gallery Fun, Basquiat, Keith Haring, Fab Five Freddy, just really important people.
there are those connectors, those people that are in a scene that help to make it a scene. And some people break out of it and some people don't. Most people don't. This is true in music as well, in literary. And God bless the connectors. It's a really important role and often a thankless one, but nothing good gets out there unless people help to make it happen. And in a way, like, I guess, like to sort of take us back to the beginning and the very thumbnail of the whole episode, how to be happy when the world would prefer you sad. I think that's one of the things you do is be a connector.
Yeah.
You know, and be just part of that process.
Absolutely. In the immortal words of Jim Carroll in his song, People Who've Died, you know, Patty, we salute you. We absolutely salute you. All right, I think we should wrap up. We've done this for 250. But I want to play one more thing for you, Bob, just because I think it's funny. And we can't play it next week because it'll be way past April Fool's. But this is something that Tanya had sent to me, which I think is hilarious. But partly because in the news, there has been a reaction. So we'll just watch this for a second, and this will be our little thing that'll help take us.
Unsafe crossing a crosswalk? Cars cutting off your right of way? That's why Vision Zero Vancouver is excited to introduce Bricks, a new pilot program to enhance pedestrian safety. Simply grab a brick at one of our designated stands, enter the crosswalk with the brick clearly visible to surrounding vehicles, and cross the street with the full confidence that you and everyone around you is aware of your ability to protect yourself. We believe bricks will be a major disruptor to the pedestrian safety industry. Although speed bumps and other traffic calming measures do play a critical role in keeping pedestrians safe, they rely on political leadership. And frankly, who can rely on that? What you can rely on is a concrete solution. As the saying goes, sometimes the best defense is a brick.
Okay, first of all, I absolutely love that. I love that so much. But here's why it came up in the news. So there's a lawyer, so I have to be careful how I phrase this, said, quote, "Let's be clear. What they've done here is facilitate criminal offenses." Kyla Lee is, I think, the lawyer's name. Quote, "When you threaten to use a weapon to cause harm to somebody or do harm to their property, it's a criminal offense. If you were to walk across the street waving a brick at a car, presumably you're going to smash their window or dent their hood or, God forbid, beat the shit out of the driver because they didn't stop for you in the crosswalk when you have a right of way. That is a criminal offense." It was a joke. The bricks were foam. And so this lawyer is, I don't know how in on the joke this lawyer was, but when I saw that story, dude, I started laughing because I know it's like Nicola and Nelson Street. I know how hard it is to cross the street there. You worked in Vancouver. You know how insane it is to cross some of those intersections under bridges. I just thought it was really funny to walk holding a styrofoam brick. That'll give somebody pause.
They didn't pretend to throw the brick. I like the fact, and I don't know why this made me so happy, but that the word brick was capitalized.
Yeah, totally.
Like it was a thing. It's a proper noun.
Totally. Brick. Before we go, what are you looking forward to this week for the rest of the week?
That's a good question. Nothing. Is that sad?
Yes, we're supposed to turn sadness into happiness for this show. I'm looking forward to the Black Keys on the show tomorrow. I'm definitely looking forward to that. And I think maybe on the weekend, I don't think I can pull it off, but I'm aiming to hop on my motorcycle and pack the tent and just go camping. If not this weekend, next weekend, just head out there. And then in a couple weeks, I'm going to go see No Doubt play Coachella. So I'm very happy about that. That'll be exciting. And Justice will play.
I actually didn't listen because I remembered something. And then I got so excited thinking about it that I'm sure your life is great. It always is. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to invite my parents over. Yeah. And my mom, my dad, and my daughter are going to be the judges. And me and my wife are going to have an Iron Chef competition where we take one ingredient and we have to prepare 3 dishes with it. And then they're going to judge to see who the champion cook of the house is.
That's a great idea. That's an amazing idea. My money's on Sandra for sure. But
she's so much better than me. My only hope is that she takes pity on me, which kind of explains the last 20 years, really.
I love it. Good to see you, dude.
Yeah, good to see you too. This is always a lot of fun. By the way, David Moscrop, smart guy.
Yeah, really great. Absolutely.
Yeah, look at that. Look, yeah. You know what?
Yeah.
He looks kind of like the bassist in a straight edge hardcore band in the first one.
In this one?
And in the second one, he looks like that guy's accountant.
Yeah. Or he actually looks like a singer in a hardcore band. This is a hardcore band singer. in the early 2000s when I was hosting Loud on the Punk Show. So I think definitely, yeah, he's great. David's great. He's such a great writer. He's such a thoughtful guy. I'm really glad. Obviously, grateful that he said yes. And Zaya Tong was on last week, and I know Seth was on. We're working on getting a couple other really interesting people to hang out with us as well as we roll through. What does this guy look like? What kind of band does this guy look like he's in, Bob?
Devo.
There you go. Earth Day. We're going to get into that stuff when we do Devo. Robert, what a pleasure to see you. We didn't get too old timey when we talked about stuff today. We actually we got to talk about some.
What are you talking about? We did a segment called This Week in 1994, and we actually had an opening graphic for it.
We didn't get too old timey, is what I said. We didn't get too old timey on the show. At least that's
well,
what
who gets to pick what too much is. Like if you pick it, of course it's not too much.
That's just how it goes. What did you used to always say? You and Jeff say, you do the work, we keep the money, except no one's getting paid for this. Except no one's getting paid. No one's getting paid for this. Lenora, thank you so much for the company.
You are the show. We keep the money.
I love that. All right. So I guess, I mean, I'm just trying to see what kind of funny thing I could play to help take us home.
But you know what you got to play?
What?
The Kilometre Thermometre.
Where did I put that now? Where did I put that? Let me find it here. Here we go.